The scent was wrong. Bitter betrayal flooded her senses as Lyra stood motionless at the edge of the clearing. The familiar pine and earth that had comforted her since childhood was tainted with something foreign and sweet. Jasmine, the signature scent of Freya, the pack's most coveted beta female. Lyra's fingers trembled against the rough bark of the ancient oak tree, her breath caught in her throat. The full moon hung accusingly overhead, illuminating the Ironwood Pack's annual winter hunt celebration, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground as laughter and triumphant howls echoed through the night air. 20 years of military discipline had shaped Colonel Garrick Drake into the perfect alpha specimen. His powerful shoulders and commanding presence had earned him not just respect in battle, but the right to lead their pack after the current alpha stepped down. Lyra had been his chosen, his promised one, despite her status as a wolfless omega. She was incomplete in the eyes of their kind, born without the ability to shift, a hollow vessel. Yet Garrick had sworn their pre-bond would transcend this flaw. The silvery mark on her wrist pulsed with the memory of his promise. The frigid winter air carried snippets of conversation and merriment from the bonfire. Lyra was a ghost at the edges of her own celebration, the whispers following her like cobwebs. Wolfless omega, empty shell. How could she anchor someone as powerful as Garrick? She had spent the evening with her chin lifted high, ignoring the sideways glances and pitying stares, clinging to the fragile thread of their bond, the sacred promise granted by the moon goddess herself. Now she wished she had stayed home. The great oak marked the boundary of the celebration grounds. Beyond it, the forest grew wild and dark, a perfect place for secret meetings and whispered promises. Garrick stood beneath the sprawling branches, his powerful form pressed against the slender body of Freya. His hands, the same hands that had tenderly cupped Lyra's face only that morning and promised her forever, were buried in Freya's silver hair. Their kiss was deep, possessive, a declaration of intent that shattered the world around Lyra. The pre-bond in her chest didn't simply crack, it violently shattered. Ice and fire cascaded through every nerve ending as she felt the physical tearing of a connection that was supposed to be unbreakable. The phantom pain from the wolf she didn't possess howled through her soul. Garrick's eyes found hers across the small distance, those blue eyes that had once reminded her of summer skies, hardened into chips of ice. There was no shock, no remorse, only cold, dismissive cruelty. Freya's lips curved into a triumphant smile as she assessed Lyra's simple wool dress, marking her territory by pressing closer to Garrick's chest. Lyra! Her name from his lips fell flat and emotionless. He made no move to disentangle himself from Freya, who practically purred as she rubbed her cheek against his chest, marking him with her scent. The pack, drawn by the sudden suffocating silence, began to turn toward the scene unfolding at the edge of the clearing. Faces emerged from the firelight, eyes wide with morbid curiosity. The whispers grew louder, bolder. Some didn't even bother to lower their voices anymore. Garrick. The word barely escaped her lips, a broken whisper stolen by the winter wind. The pre-bond writhed in her soul like a dying serpent, poisoning her from within. The pain manifested as a constant, sharp pressure behind her ribs. "This isn't working." His words cut clean and sharp, a tactical strike meant to eliminate any resistance. A strong alpha needs a she-wolf who can run at his side, not this. He gestured vaguely at her entire being, her lack of a wolf, her omega status, her quiet nature. With a single motion, he dismissed her entire existence. Freya giggled, the sound like tiny malicious bells in the silence. "He needs a wolf who can give him heirs, Lyra. Strong alpha-blooded pups, not barren air." The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. Barren. The pack's deepest shame, the ultimate failure for a female wolf. Without a wolf of her own, her body was considered an empty vessel, incapable of carrying the next generation of shifters, a biological reality she had tried to ignore, a flaw Garrick had once sworn didn't matter. "You promised." Her voice trembled as she spoke, hands clenched at her sides. The weight of the entire Ironwood Pack's stairs pressed upon her shoulders. Their pity suffocated her like a thick, heavy blanket. The elders turned away in disgust, while younger wolves snickered behind raised hands. She had become a spectacle, a broken toy being publicly discarded. Garrick stepped forward, finally separating himself from Freya. For a brief, hopeful moment, Lyra thought she might glimpse the man she had loved, a hint of regret or compassion. She was wrong. He grabbed her wrist with military precision, his grip hard and unforgiving. He lifted her arm, revealing the faint silvery mark of their pre-bond shimmering on her skin like a brand of shame. "I reject this bond," he declared, his voice resonating with the formal power of his alpha blood. "I, Colonel Garrick Drake of the Ironwood Pack, sever all ties to Lyra Winters. She is no mate of mine. She is wolfless. She is barren. She is nothing." The pain that ripped through Lyra transcended physical understanding. It was worse than the initial shattering. This was the deliberate twisting of a blade already embedded in her heart. The silver mark on her wrist flared with white-hot agony before dissolving into nothing, leaving behind an angry red patch of raw skin. The phantom limb of their connection wasn't merely broken. It was amputated without anesthesia. A scream built in her throat but wouldn't emerge. She stood mute with agony, drowning in a sea of contemptuous faces as Garrick released her. She stumbled backward, her legs threatening to fail. But she didn't fall. A worse fate awaited her. Garrick turned and draped his arm around Freya, pulling her back toward the warmth and celebration of the bonfire. The pack parted for them, then closed ranks, turning their backs on Lyra one by one. The message couldn't be clearer. She was no longer one of them. She was an outcast. Nothing. Something inside her snapped, not logic, not reason, pure primal survival. The lingering echo of the severed bond was a torment she could not endure, a ghost haunting her blood, a constant reminder of her failure. She had heard whispers of the old ways, of dark, desperate magic, a taboo ritual to erase the scar of a broken, faded bond. The blood mark, an ancient military ritual from the werewolf wars centuries ago. You couldn't just cut the thread. You had to burn it away completely, cauterize the wound by binding yourself, however briefly, to another. It had to be immediate, before the scar tissue of rejection formed in the soul. It was madness, a reckless act that spat in the face of the moon goddess herself, and it was the only thought that penetrated the fog of pain surrounding Lyra's mind. Without a backward glance at the pack that had discarded her, she turned and fled into the darkness of the winter forest. She ran heedless of the branches that tore at her dress and scratched her skin. The forest floor was treacherous, a carpet of snow-covered roots and hidden stones. But she didn't slow down. She ran from the laughter, from the pity, from the ghost of Garrick's touch. She ran until her lungs burned and her vision blurred with tears of rage and pain. The territorial markers of the Ironwood Pack gradually faded as she pushed deeper into the wilderness. The scents became unfamiliar, the land wilder. She had crossed into the neutral territory, a lawless stretch of forest that served as a buffer between the major packs, a place where pack law held no jurisdiction. A dangerous place for any wolf, let alone a wolfless Omega traveling alone. Her frantic flight led her to a place she had been warned about her entire life. Howling Pass. The ramshackle timber-framed tavern stood defiant against the winter night, a beacon of dubious sanctuary in the wilderness. Light spilled from its windows, and the sounds of rowdy conversation and clinking glasses carried on the cold air. This was where rogues, mercenaries, and exiles gathered, a place no respectable pack wolf would ever enter. Lyra paused at the edge of the clearing, her breath coming in ragged gasps that formed white clouds in the frigid air. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, and her wrist still burned where Garrick had severed their bond. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings, but the wounded animal within pushed her forward. She needed this. She needed someone, anyone, to burn away Garrick's mark on her soul. The tavern door creaked as she pushed it open. Warmth and the pungent smell of alcohol, sweat, and unfamiliar wolves assaulted her senses. The cacophony of conversation stuttered then ceased as every head turned toward her. These weren't pack wolves with their polished manners and societal constraints. These were the outcasts, the dangerous ones who lived by their own rules. She could smell the different supernatural creatures. Werewolves dominated, but there were others. Witches with their herb and smoke scent, vampires with their cold, metallic aura, even a few humans, mercenaries who specialized in hunting supernatural targets. Silver weapons hung openly on belts, a direct threat to any wolf who stepped out of line. Lyra straightened her spine, summoning the dignity that remained within her. Her eyes scanned the dimly lit room, searching for someone, anyone, who might help her perform the bloodmark ritual. She needed someone strong enough to override Garrick's lingering presence, someone whose mark would cauterize the wound left behind. The tavern patrons assessed her with predatory gazes. She was wounded prey walking willingly into a den of predators. Several of the rougher-looking wolves began to rise from their seats, sensing opportunity. Then she saw him. He sat alone in the corner, partially hidden in shadow. The space around his table remained conspicuously empty despite the crowded tavern. Even from across the room, Lyra felt the power radiating from him like heat from a forge. His face bore the marks of battle. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, the white line stark against his tanned skin. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, the mark of an alpha who had seen more than his fair share of winters. But it was his eyes that captured her attention. Golden as a harvest moon, they glowed with an inner fire that spoke of barely restrained power. They weren't the eyes of a rogue or mercenary. They were the eyes of a born leader, a warrior who had seen battlefields and survived. The stranger's gaze locked with hers across the tavern. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never met. His eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her with military precision. He saw the torn dress, the wild desperation in her eyes, the angry red mark on her wrist where a bond had recently been severed. Lyra moved toward him as if pulled by an invisible thread, ignoring the whispers and growls that followed her through the crowded room. The other patrons shifted away, creating a path between her and the mysterious stranger. She stopped before his table, her heart pounding against her ribs. Up close, his power was overwhelming. He smelled of a gathering storm and ancient forests, of steel and blood and authority. This was no ordinary wolf. This was a predator among predators. "You're bleeding." His voice was deep and resonant, the kind that commanded armies and expected absolute obedience. He nodded toward her wrist where Garrick had removed their prebond. "Not physically." Lyra's voice sounded strange to her own ears, steadier than she felt. The stranger's golden eyes flicked to the red mark on her wrist, understanding dawning in their depths. "A severed bond. Recent. Hours old at most. I need your help." The words escaped before she could reconsider. "I need the blood mark." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the tavern. The blood mark was taboo, a ritual from darker times when wolves were at war. It was a temporary binding originally used by wolf soldiers who had lost their mates in battle and needed to function through the crippling pain until they could properly mourn. The stranger's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in his golden eyes. "You don't know what you're asking for, little Omega." "I know exactly what I'm asking for." Lyra didn't back down, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I need to burn out what was left behind." He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her worth against some unknown standard. The tavern had gone completely silent now, all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. "Do you know the cost of such a mark?" His voice lowered, meant only for her ears. "It's not just physical. The blood mark creates a temporary bond, a battlefield remedy for wolves who needed to keep fighting after losing their mates. It was never meant for civilians. I'm not asking for forever." Lyra's voice trembled slightly, just long enough to erase what he left behind. The stranger's jaw tightened, and she feared he would refuse. Then, with a fluidity that belied his size, he stood. He towered over her, his broad shoulders blocking the light from the fireplace behind him. Without a word, he placed a heavy coin purse on the table and gestured toward a door at the back of the tavern. Lyra followed him through the crowd, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes tracking their movement. The stranger opened the door to reveal a small private room with a single bed and a fireplace. Simple accommodations for travelers who needed privacy or protection. Once inside, he closed the door and turned to face her. The small room seemed to shrink in his presence. "Last chance to reconsider, Omega." His voice contained a warning. "The blood mark isn't something to be taken lightly." Neither was the promise he broke. Lyra removed her torn cloak, revealing more of the simple dress beneath. "I can't live with his ghost inside me. I need it gone." The stranger nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement. "Your name?" "Lyra Winters." "Remove your dress to the waist. The mark needs to be placed over your heart." His clinical tone removed any potential embarrassment from the request. This wasn't about desire. It was about ritual, about magic old as the werewolf species itself. Lyra turned away and pulled down the top of her dress, exposing her back and shoulders, while keeping her arms through the sleeves to hold the fabric at her waist. She heard him move behind her, felt the heat of his body as he approached. His scent enveloped her, storm winds and steel, power barely contained. "This will hurt." His warm breath brushed against her bare shoulder. "The blood mark is meant to override an existing bond through pain and power. Are you certain?" "Yes." Lyra closed her eyes, bracing herself. "What's your name? I should at least know whose mark I'll carry." A pause, heavy with unspoken weight. "Kieran," he said finally. Just one name, offered reluctantly, as if it were a gift he rarely bestowed. His hand came to rest between her shoulder blades, large and warm against her skin. She felt him lean closer, his chest nearly touching her back. The power emanating from him intensified, prickling along her skin like electricity before a storm. "By blood and by will, I mark you as mine until the moon completes her cycle." The ritual words rumbled from his chest, ancient and binding. "Your pain is now mine to bear, your burden mine to carry. Your former bonds are burned away by my claim. So it was in war, so it shall be in peace." His teeth sank into the curve where her neck met her shoulder, not a lover's gentle nip, but a warrior's claim, deep enough to mark, controlled enough not to maim. Lyra gasped as pain lanced through her, white-hot and cleansing. But beneath the pain came something unexpected. Power. It flooded into her through the connection of his teeth on her skin, washing through her veins like liquid fire. The phantom wound where Garrick's bond had been ripped away suddenly flared with renewed agony, as if fighting against this new intrusion. For a terrible moment, the pain doubled as both bonds, the severed and the forming, warred within her. Then, like ice beneath a blowtorch, Garrick's remnant bond began to dissolve, consumed by the raw power of Kieran's mark. Lyra's knees buckled as the sensations overwhelmed her. Kieran's arms snaked around her waist, supporting her weight as he maintained the connection, his teeth still embedded in her flesh. The ritual required sustained contact until the old bond was completely overwritten. Images flashed through Lyra's mind. Battlefields strewn with bodies, a fortress of black ice against northern mountains, a throne room filled with powerful alphas bowing to a single figure. She tasted blood and victory, felt the weight of responsibility so crushing it threatened to break even the strongest spirit. These weren't her memories, they were his. Just as the visions threatened to overwhelm her, Kieran released her neck. The separation sent another shockwave through her system, leaving her gasping. The arm around her waist remained, holding her upright as her body adjusted to the new magical reality. "It's done." His voice sounded strained, as if the ritual had affected him more than he'd expected. "The old bond is burned away." Lyra slowly became aware of her surroundings again. The small room, the crackling fire, the warm body supporting her weight. The pain was subsiding, replaced by a strange, humming awareness, centered on the mark Kieran had left. It wasn't like her bond with Garrick. This was raw, primal, lacking the emotional connection, but possessing a power that made her previous bond seem like a child's drawing compared to a master's painting. She carefully pulled her dress back up, covering herself, before turning in Kieran's arms to face him. Their eyes met, and she saw something new in his golden gaze. Surprise, perhaps even concern. Whatever he had expected from the ritual, this wasn't it. Before either could speak, the door burst open. 4 men in black military-style uniforms stormed into the small room, silver weapons drawn and pointed directly at Kieran. Their expressions shifted from determination to shock as they registered the scene before them. "Lord Blackthorn," one of them said, his voice tight with barely concealed alarm. "We've been searching for you since you disappeared from the hunting party." Lord Blackthorn. The name crashed through Lyra's consciousness like a thunderbolt. It couldn't be. It was impossible. More soldiers appeared in the doorway, forming a protective perimeter. Their uniforms bore the emblem of the Northern Alliance, a silver wolf against a field of black, and on their shoulders the mark of the Royal Guard. The soldier's eyes flicked to Lyra, noting her disheveled appearance and the fresh mark visible on her neck. His expression hardened. "Sir, we need to return to the fortress immediately. The Council has convened an emergency session in your absence." Kieran's arm slowly withdrew from Lyra's waist, his expression transforming into the impassive mask of command. The vulnerable moment between them vanished as if it had never existed. "Prepare the horses," he ordered, his voice now fully embodying the authority she had only glimpsed before. "We leave in 5 minutes." The soldiers saluted and withdrew, though 2 remained posted outside the door. Kieran turned back to Lyra, his golden eyes unreadable. "You marked me." Lyra's voice shook, the enormity of what had just happened crashing down upon her. "You're Kieran Blackthorn." "General Kieran Blackthorn," he corrected, his voice lowered so the guards wouldn't hear. "Alpha King of the Northern Alliance, and yes, I marked you." The blood mark ritual was meant to be performed by a wolf of equal or greater strength than the one who had created the original bond. Lyra had expected to find a strong rogue, perhaps even a minor alpha. Instead, she had been marked by the most powerful alpha on the continent, the legendary warlord who had unified the 7 northern packs after decades of bloody conflict. This changes things. Kieran's eyes tracked to the fresh mark on her neck, his expression troubled. The blood mark should have been temporary, a battlefield expedient, but I can already feel it's something different. Lyra's hand drifted to the mark, still warm under her fingertips. Different how? Deeper, more permanent. His jaw tightened. "I've performed this ritual for soldiers who lost mates in battle. It never felt like this." The implications hung in the air between them. The blood mark was supposed to last only until the next full moon, giving the wounded wolf time to heal from the severed bond. It wasn't meant to create a true connection, yet both of them could feel something substantial had formed between them, something neither had anticipated. "You'll come with me to Blackthorn Fortress." It wasn't a request. "I can't!" Panic flared in Lyra's chest. "I just needed the mark to erase Garrick's bond. I plan to disappear after, find somewhere to start over." "That's no longer an option." Kieran's voice was unyielding. "Whatever happened during that ritual created a connection that needs to be understood. And I can't leave you unprotected now that you bear my mark. Every enemy I have would see you as a weakness to exploit." The door opened again before Lyra could respond. The same soldier appeared, his expression carefully neutral. "The horses are ready, my lord." Kieran nodded, then turned back to Lyra. "Pack your belongings." "I have nothing." She gestured to her torn dress and the cloak she had arrived in. "I ran with what I wore." Something flickered across Kieran's face. Understanding, perhaps even sympathy. He removed his heavy outer cloak and placed it around her shoulders. The garment was lined with fur and still warm from his body, the weight of it both protective and possessive. "Then we leave now." The journey north was a blur of exhaustion and revelation. Lyra rode with Kieran on his massive black warhorse, surrounded by a contingent of elite guards. They traveled through the night and into the following day, stopping only to rest the horses. Kieran spoke little, his attention focused on their surroundings with the hypervigilance of a veteran soldier. The landscape transformed as they journeyed northward. Deciduous forests gave way to ancient pine, the terrain growing steeper and more rugged. Snow blanketed everything, pristine and unforgiving, and the air grew increasingly sharp with cold. They crested a mountain pass as the sun began to set on the second day. Kieran drew his horse to a halt, allowing Lyra to see what lay beyond. The view stole what little breath remained in her lungs. Blackthorn Fortress rose from the mountainside like a natural extension of the stone itself, a sprawling citadel of black granite and gleaming ice. Towers spiraled upward, crowned with banners that snapped in the northern wind. Massive walls surrounded the central keep, patrolled by figures that appeared tiny from this distance. Beyond the fortress spread the northern territories, a vast expanse of mountains, forests, and frozen lakes, all unified under Kieran's rule. "Welcome to my kingdom," Kieran's voice rumbled close to her ear, his arms secure around her waist. They descended toward the fortress, following a path wide enough for military caravans. As they approached, horns sounded from the watchtowers, announcing their arrival. The massive gates swung open, revealing a bustling courtyard filled with soldiers, servants, and the everyday workings of the most powerful military stronghold in the werewolf world. Every eye turned toward them as they entered. Lyra felt the weight of countless stares, curious, suspicious, assessing. She was an outsider, a stranger brought into their midst by their king. Worse, she was visibly marked by him, the fresh bite clearly visible, despite her attempts to hide it beneath Kieran's cloak. Servants rushed forward as they dismounted. A stern-faced older woman approached, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression one of carefully controlled disapproval. "My lord, the council awaits in the war room. They've been assembled for nearly a day." "Thank you, Matron Helena." Kieran's tone was polite, but dismissive. "Please see that Lady Lyra is given appropriate quarters and anything she requires." The woman's eyes darted to Lyra, taking in her bedraggled appearance and the mark on her neck. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she bowed slightly. "As you wish, my lord." Kieran turned to Lyra, his expression softening marginally. "Rest. We'll speak later." He strode away before she could respond, his guards falling into formation around him. The ease of command was evident in every step, every gesture. This was a man born and bred for leadership, for war, for power. Matron Helena cleared her throat. "If you'll follow me, Lady Lyra." The fortress interior was as imposing as its exterior. High ceilings, stone walls hung with ancient tapestries depicting battle scenes, floors covered with thick furs. Servants moved efficiently through the corridors, and guards stood at attention at regular intervals. This wasn't merely a home, it was the seat of power for an entire alliance of packs. They passed numerous wolves on their journey through the winding corridors. Each one paused to bow slightly to Helena before their eyes landed on Lyra with undisguised curiosity. Some expressions shifted to suspicion when they noted her lack of a wolf scent. A wolfless omega in the heart of the most powerful alpha's territory was unprecedented. Helena led her to a chamber high in one of the towers. The room was spacious and well-appointed, with a large bed covered in furs, a blazing fireplace, and windows that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding mountains. It was a room meant for an honored guest, not a prisoner. "You'll find clothing in the wardrobe." Helena's tone remained cool but professional. "I'll have hot water sent up for bathing. The general will send for you when he's available." "Thank you." Lyra stood awkwardly in the center of the room, still wrapped in Kieran's cloak. "May I ask, who exactly is the general? I know he's the Alpha King, but—" Helena's eyebrows rose. "You bear his mark, yet know nothing of him?" Heat flooded Lyra's cheeks. "It's complicated." "Indeed." The older woman's expression softened fractionally. "General Kieran Blackthorn is the warlord of the Northern Alliance, unifier of the 7 great packs, and the most powerful alpha in 3 generations. 20 years ago, he ended decades of civil war by force of will and strength of arms. He has ruled ever since." The information aligned with the flashes Lyra had received during the marking ritual, the battlefields, the throne room, the weight of responsibility. And the council he's meeting with? The 7 alphas who lead the individual packs within the alliance. Helena's expression grew guarded. They're not known for their patience or their acceptance of unusual circumstances. Like a wolfless omega bearing their king's mark, the implication hung in the air between them. Helena departed shortly after, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts. Servants arrived with steaming water for the copper bathtub, averting their eyes respectfully, but unable to hide their curious glances. Lyra shed her torn dress and Kieran's cloak, wincing as she caught sight of herself in a polished metal mirror. The mark on her neck was vivid against her pale skin, a perfect impression of Kieran's teeth, the edges already healing with unnatural speed. But it was the energy emanating from the mark that disturbed her most. It pulsed with power, tendrils of sensation spreading outward through her body like roots seeking purchase in fertile soil. The blood mark was supposed to be superficial, a temporary override. This felt like something far more significant. She sank into the hot water, allowing it to ease her travel-worn muscles. As her body relaxed, her mind raced. In the span of 3 days, she had lost one bond and gained another, been rejected by her pack, and brought to the fortress of the most powerful alpha in the known world. It was too much to process. After bathing, she found clothing in the wardrobe as promised, simple but well-made dresses, warm leggings, and boots lined with fur. Everything fit surprisingly well. She chose a deep blue dress with silver embroidery, the colors of the Northern Alliance. If she was to face whatever awaited her, she would do so with dignity. Night had fallen by the time a knock came at her door. A young guard stood outside, his expression carefully neutral. "Lady Lyra, the general requests your presence in his study." She followed the guard through the winding corridors of the fortress, descending from the guest tower into the heart of the keep. The guard stopped before an imposing oak door, reinforced with black iron bands. He knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. "Lady Lyra, my lord." Kieran stood before a massive fireplace, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. The study was a reflection of the man himself, austere yet elegant, practical yet commanding. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound tomes. Maps covered a large table in the center of the room, weighted down with various markers, indicating troop movements and territorial boundaries. This was the room where wars were planned and kingdoms governed. "Leave us," Kieran ordered without turning. The guard bowed and withdrew, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Lyra took the opportunity to study Kieran properly for the first time. He had changed from his traveling clothes into attire befitting his station: black trousers tucked into polished boots, a charcoal tunic with silver embroidery at the collar, and cuffs. A silver wolf's headpin secured a black cloak at his shoulder. He looked every inch the warrior king of legend. "Your council meeting is concluded?" Lyra broke the silence, her voice steadier than she felt. Kieran turned to face her. His golden eyes took in her appearance, lingering briefly on the mark visible at the edge of her collar. Something flickered in his gaze, approval, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. "For now." His voice carried the weight of unspoken complications. "They've been informed of your presence." "And how did they react to a wolfless omega bearing your mark?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone in an instant. "With predictable alarm." He moved away from the fireplace, gesturing for her to take one of the chairs positioned before his desk. He remained standing, his physical dominance a habit rather than a conscious choice. The bloodmark ritual should have created a temporary bond, a battlefield expedient to allow a soldier to continue functioning after losing a mate. Kieran's tone was measured, analytical. "But what formed between us is something else entirely." Lyra's hand drifted to the mark on her neck, still warm beneath her fingertips. "I can feel it. I can feel. It's growing stronger, not weaker." "As can I." Kieran's jaw tightened. "When I agreed to the ritual, I expected to feel a minor pull, easily managed until the next full moon. Instead, I feel—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Connected. Aware of your presence in a way that shouldn't be possible with a temporary bond." "Why?" Lyra's question encompassed everything. Why had the ritual gone wrong? Why had he agreed to it? Why was she here? Kieran moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered mountains beyond. I don't know, but I intend to find out. He turned back to her, his expression grave. There's something else you should know. Something that may explain why I was in that tavern alone, why I agreed to the ritual. Lyra waited, sensing the weight of whatever confession approached. The Northern Alliance is facing a threat unlike any we've encountered before. Kieran's voice lowered, each word measured. Not an external enemy, but something that strikes at the heart of what we are. A curse that affects the bond between wolf and man. A curse? Lyra leaned forward, intrigued despite her situation. The bone curse. Kieran's expression darkened. It begins slowly. Increased aggression, difficulty shifting, periods of lost time. Eventually, the afflicted alpha loses control of their wolf entirely. The beast takes over, destroying the human consciousness. Is there a cure? None that we've discovered. Kieran's hands clenched at his sides. The curse has claimed 3 powerful alphas in the past year. Their packs were forced to hunt them down like rabid animals. Horror washed through Lyra as the implications became clear. And you? Are you affected? Kieran met her gaze directly, his golden eyes burning with controlled fury and fear. Yes, I am the 4th to be afflicted, and as the strongest alpha, when I fall, I will be the most dangerous of all. The revelation hung in the air between them, terrible in its simplicity. The most powerful alpha in a generation was slowly losing himself to a curse that turned werewolves into mindless beasts. That's why you were alone in the tavern, Lyra realized. You were isolating yourself. I was hunting for information about the curse, Kieran corrected. But yes, I've begun taking precautions. My wolf, Storm, grows more difficult to control with each passing day. How long? Before I lose control completely? Kieran's expression was grim. Months, perhaps less. The curse seems to progress more rapidly in stronger alphas. Lyra processed this information, trying to reconcile the powerful, controlled man before her with the fate he described. What does this have to do with our mark? I don't know. Kieran's frustration was evident in the tight set of his shoulders. But since the ritual, Storm has been quieter, more settled. It may be coincidence, or it may be significant. Hope flickered briefly across his features before being suppressed by military discipline. He wouldn't allow himself to believe in salvation until he had proof. There's more. Kieran moved to his desk, retrieving an ancient scroll carefully preserved between sheets of protective material. A prophecy that has troubled the Northern Alliance for generations. It speaks of the curse and potentially its cure. He unrolled the delicate parchment, revealing faded script in an ancient language. The wolfless one will break the kingdom of bone, but from its ruins shall rise a kingdom of moonlight. Lyra's blood ran cold at the words. The wolfless one? For centuries we interpreted it as a warning that someone without a wolf would destroy the Northern Alliance. Kieran's eyes met hers across the desk. We treated wolfless omegas as potential threats, isolated them from centers of power. The cruel treatment Lyra had experienced suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just prejudice, it was fear based on ancient prophecy. But what if we misinterpreted? Kieran continued. What if the wolfless one is meant to break the curse, the kingdom of bone, rather than the literal kingdom? The possibility hung between them, fragile and dangerous as a soap bubble. Hope was a luxury neither could afford to embrace fully. You think I might be connected to the cure? Lyra's voice barely rose above a whisper. I think our unexpected connection warrants investigation. Kieran's tone returned to that of the military strategist. For now, you'll remain here at Blackthorn Fortress under my protection. The Council has agreed, albeit reluctantly. Protection or custody? Lyra wondered, but didn't voice the thought. She was too overwhelmed by the revelations, by the enormity of what Kieran faced, by the possibility that their chance encounter might have deeper meaning. Before either could speak further, a sharp knock sounded at the door. "Enter!" Kieran called, his posture straightening imperceptibly. A tall, broad-shouldered man with silver-streaked black hair and the bearing of a veteran soldier strode into the room. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, immediately fixed on Lyra before turning to Kieran. "Marshal Vargas." Kieran's tone held respect and familiarity. "What brings you here at this hour?" "Reports from the southern border." Marshal Vargas's voice was gruff, weathered by years of command. "The Ironwood Pack requests immediate audience. They claim one of their Omegas has been abducted." Lyra's heart stuttered in her chest. Ironwood. Garrick's pack. Her former pack. Vargas's gaze returned to her, assessment clear in his eyes. "I take it this is the Omega in question?" "This is Lady Lyra," Kieran replied, emphasizing her title in a way that established her position. "And she was not abducted. She sought sanctuary after being publicly rejected by her mate." Vargas raised an eyebrow. "The Ironwood delegation claims otherwise. Their alpha-elect, Colonel Drake, personally leads the party." Garrick, here. The name sent a wave of nausea through Lyra's body. Barely 3 days after rejecting her before his entire pack, he had the audacity to claim abduction? Interesting. Kieran's voice had gone dangerously soft. "And what exactly does Colonel Drake hope to accomplish by this false claim?" "Politics, I'd imagine." Vargas's expression suggested he found the situation distasteful. "A wolfless Omega bearing the mark of the Alpha King creates questions. Questions lead to instability. Drake likely hopes to remove the complication before it can affect Ironwood's standing in the alliance." Kieran's eyes flashed golden for a moment, a sign of his wolf stirring beneath the surface. "Inform Colonel Drake that I will grant him audience tomorrow morning. Not before." "And the Omega?" Vargas glanced at Lyra again, his expression unreadable. "Lady Lyra remains under my personal protection." Kieran's tone brooked no argument. "Any claim to the contrary will be considered a direct challenge to my authority." Vargas nodded, though something in his eyes suggested concern rather than disagreement. "As you command, my lord." After the marshal departed, silence fell between Lyra and Kieran. The revelation that Garrick had followed her, had dared to claim she was abducted after publicly rejecting her, ignited a fury Lyra had never experienced before. "I won't go back to him." Her voice shook with emotion. "He rejected me before the entire pack, called me nothing." "You won't." Kieran's response was immediate, absolute. The blood mark supersedes any previous claim, especially one formally rejected. Drake has no legal standing. Relief washed through Lyra, followed quickly by confusion. "Then why come here? Why risk angering you with false accusations?" Kieran's expression darkened. "That is the question, isn't it? What would drive an alpha-elect to such a desperate move?" He returned to the window, his posture rigid with controlled tension. "Get some rest, Lyra. Tomorrow will bring its own battles." She recognized the dismissal for what it was. Not rejection, but a commander's need for solitude to strategize. She rose from her chair, moving toward the door. "Kieran?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob, his name still unfamiliar on her lips. "Thank you." He didn't turn, but she saw his reflection in the window pane, the slight softening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. That night, alone in her tower room, Lyra dreamed. She ran through a moonlit forest, faster than she had ever moved in her human form. The ground flew beneath her paws, not feet. She was a wolf, sleek and powerful, her coat shimmering silver in the moonlight. Beside her ran a massive black wolf with golden eyes, their movements perfectly synchronized as they patrolled their territory. Their territory. Their pack. The concepts settled into her consciousness with surprising rightness. When she awoke, the dream lingered with unusual clarity. Her skin tingled with a strange energy, and when she looked at her hands in the pre-dawn light, she could have sworn she saw a faint silver glow beneath her skin. Impossible. She was wolfless, had been since birth. Yet the sensation persisted, a humming awareness just beneath her consciousness, like a voice calling from too far away to distinguish words. She rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered mountains surrounding Blackthorn Fortress. Somewhere in those mountains, Garrick waited with his false accusations. Somewhere in this fortress, Kieran battled a curse that threatened to consume him. And here she stood, caught between them, bearing a mark that should have been temporary but felt increasingly permanent. The Wolfless One will break the kingdom of bone. The prophecy echoed in her mind as the first rays of dawn crept over the eastern mountains, bathing the fortress in golden light. Whatever came next, Lyra knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Daylight brought no comfort to Blackthorn Fortress. The imposing council chamber echoed with tension as 7 alpha leaders arranged themselves around the massive oak table. Stone-faced warriors, hardened by battles and politics, they watched with predatory attention as Kieran entered. Lyra followed 3 paces behind, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the military uniforms and battle leathers that dominated the room. Every eye tracked her movement, assessing the wolfless Omega who bore their king's mark. Marshal Vargas stood at attention by the entrance, his weathered face betraying nothing as he announced formally, "General Kieran Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Alliance and Warlord of the 7 Territories." Kieran moved to the head of the table with the fluid confidence of a natural predator. He wore formal military attire, a black uniform adorned with silver insignia of his rank and achievements, a ceremonial sword at his hip. His power filled the room like a physical presence, demanding respect without a single word spoken. "My lords and ladies," Kieran acknowledged the council with a slight inclination of his head, "I appreciate your patience during my absence." A muscular woman with iron-gray hair snorted softly. 3 days without explanation is hardly the behavior we expect from our leader, especially in these troubled times. "Lady Ravenna speaks truth," added a lean man with sharp features and calculating eyes, "particularly when you return with an unexpected companion." Kieran's expression remained impassive. "Allow me to introduce Lady Lyra Winters, formerly of the Ironwood Pack. She has sought sanctuary under my protection." Murmurs rippled around the table. Lyra stood straighter, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. The mark on her neck throbbed in response to the rising tension. "A wolfless Omega." The words came from a barrel-chested alpha with a scar bisecting his left eye. "You've brought a wolfless Omega into the heart of our alliance and marked her. Have you forgotten the prophecy, my lord?" "I have forgotten nothing, Lord Fenris." Kieran's voice carried the subtle edge of warning. "Lady Lyra's presence may in fact be significant to our current crisis." A tall, slender man with midnight black hair and unsettling pale eyes leaned forward. Unlike the others, he wore formal diplomatic attire instead of military gear, Ambassador Mordath from the Eastern Shadowcrest Pack. "My lord, while I respect your judgment, the timing is concerning." Mordath's voice was smooth as silk, but danger lurked beneath. "Our scouts report increased activity from the Red Alliance along the southern borders. They've been recruiting disaffected wolves from multiple territories." The Red Alliance. Lyra couldn't stop herself from speaking the name aloud, drawing sharp glances from around the table. Kieran regarded her with a measured look before addressing the council. "Lady Lyra is unfamiliar with our current threats. Ambassador Mordath, please enlighten her." The ambassador's pale eyes fixed on Lyra. The Red Alliance began as a fringe movement among wolves who believe humans have corrupted our kind. They advocate returning to primal ways, hunting humans, abandoning civilization, living solely by pack law. Once merely philosophical, they've become increasingly militant under new leadership. "They exploit the bone curse," added Lady Ravenna grimly, "claiming its punishment from the old gods for abandoning our true nature." Marshal Vargas stepped forward, his military bearing commanding attention. "Recent intelligence suggests they're amassing forces. 3 border villages reported raids last month, supplies taken, young wolves abducted for recruitment." Kieran's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And the connection to Ironwood territory?" Our scouts tracked a large contingent moving toward the border of Ironwood lands, Vargas replied. Coincidentally, around the same time Colonel Drake arrived making accusations of abduction. Lyra's heart quickened. The implications were clear. Garrick's presence might not be solely about her. The Ironwood delegation awaits your pleasure in the Southern Hall, Vargas continued. Drake brought his beta female and 4 senior warriors. Freya, Lyra whispered, the name bitter on her tongue. I'll address the Ironwood delegation after we conclude here, Kieran decided, returning his attention to the council. The more pressing matter remains the bone curse. Silence fell across the chamber. Tension thickened the air as every wolf present confronted the unspoken fear. Their mighty Alpha King was afflicted, slowly losing control of his wolf. 3 alphas lost in the past year. Lady Ravenna broke the silence, her voice heavy with grief. Good wolves, strong leaders, reduced to mindless beasts. And the 4th stands before us. The words came from Lord Fenris, blunt and devoid of tact. How long, my lord, before Storm takes control? Kieran met the challenging gaze without flinching. Not as long as any of us would wish, but I am not defeated yet. The ancient texts mention a possible solution. Ambassador Mordath retrieved a weathered leather folio from beneath his seat. The prophecy we've long feared may actually offer hope. He opened the folio, revealing a parchment covered in faded script. The wolfless one will break the kingdom of bone, but from its ruins shall rise a kingdom of moonlight. Every gaze in the room shifted to Lyra. She fought the urge to step backward under the weight of their scrutiny. For generations, we interpreted this as a warning, Mordath continued, that a wolfless one would destroy our alliance. But what if the kingdom of bone refers not to our territories, but to the curse itself? Speculation, Lord Fenris dismissed with a wave of his hand, based on nothing but desperate hope and the convenient appearance of a wolfless Omega. Marshal Vargas cleared his throat. There is one more piece to consider. He looked to Kieran, seeking permission. At Kieran's nod, Vargas continued. The bloodmark ritual performed between General Blackthorn and Lady Winters created an unexpected result. The connection formed is deeper than traditional temporary bonding. Impossible, Lady Ravenna objected. The bloodmark is a battlefield expedient, never a true bond. Yet here we stand. Kieran's voice cut through the rising murmurs. Since the ritual, Storm has been more settled. The progression of the curse appears to have slowed. Silence fell again as the implications sank in. Lyra felt the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders, the wild hope that somehow her presence might offer salvation to not just Kieran, but all wolves threatened by the curse. This council is adjourned for now, Kieran announced. Ambassador Mordath, continue researching the prophecy. Marshal Vargas, double the patrols along the southern border. I want detailed reports on Red Alliance movements by nightfall. The Alphas rose, filing out with measured dignity despite the tension vibrating between them. Only Marshal Vargas remained, his weathered face grave as he approached Kieran. The Ironwood delegation grows restless, he reported quietly. Drake has been making veiled comments about alliance loyalties and protection duties. Political leverage, Kieran surmised, his expression hardening. Send a guard to escort Lady Lyra to the War Library. I'll deal with Colonel Drake alone. No! Lyra stepped forward, surprising herself with her boldness. I should be present. Whatever accusations Garrick makes concern me directly. Kieran studied her for a long moment, assessing not just her words, but her resolve. Very well, but stay behind me, and speak only when addressed directly. The southern hall was smaller than the council chamber, but no less imposing. Ancient weapons adorned the stone walls, swords, axes, and spears from countless battles. Massive fireplaces at either end warded off the northern chill, their flames reflecting in the polished surfaces of shields bearing the crests of fallen enemies. Colonel Garrick Drake stood at the center of the room, flanked by Freya and 4 warriors in Ironwood colors. His military bearing was impeccable, his handsome face arranged in an expression of righteous concern. When the doors opened to admit Kieran, Vargas, and Lyra, his eyes narrowed, focusing immediately on the mark visible at Lyra's neck. "General Blackthorne." Garrick offered a crisp military salute that stopped just short of sincere respect. "Thank you for finally granting us audience." Kieran didn't acknowledge the subtle barb. "Colonel Drake, I understand you've come with accusations against my court." "Not accusations, my lord. A request for justice." Garrick's gaze shifted to Lyra, his expression a masterful blend of concern and authority. "My intended mate was taken from Ironwood territory 3 nights ago. I've come to bring her home." The audacity of the lie stole Lyra's breath. Intended mate? After publicly rejecting her before the entire pack? Interesting. Kieran's voice was dangerously soft. "Particularly since my information suggests you formally rejected your bond with Lady Lyra before witnesses, declaring her nothing to the pack." Garrick's facade cracked slightly, but he recovered with practiced ease. "A misunderstanding, regrettably. Lyra fled before I could explain. She was upset, confused." "I was not confused," Lyra spoke despite Kieran's earlier warning, unable to contain her outrage. "You rejected me publicly. You called me barren and worthless." Freya stepped forward, her beautiful face arranged in a mask of sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "We understand you were distraught, Lyra. Emotional reactions are common in Omegas, especially those with your condition." "My condition?" Lyra repeated incredulously. "Being wolfless affects your mental stability," Freya explained with poisonous sweetness. "We've all been so worried. The entire pack searches for you." "The same pack that turned their backs when Garrick rejected me?" Lyra challenged, anger burning away fear. Marshal Vargas shifted subtly, positioning himself to better observe the Ironwood warriors, whose hands had drifted closer to their weapons. "Enough." Kieran's command silenced the room. "Colonel Drake, your claim is disputed by the very Omega you seek to recover. More importantly, Lady Lyra now bears my mark, superseding any previous claim, rejected or otherwise." Garrick's eyes flashed with genuine anger before he controlled his expression. "The blood mark is temporary, my lord. A battlefield remedy, not a true bond." "Yet it exists," Kieran countered. "And until the next full moon at minimum, Lady Lyra remains under my protection." A tense silence followed as Garrick calculated his next move. His gaze moved from Lyra to Kieran and back again, assessing the situation with military precision. "We respect your authority, General," he finally said, each word carefully measured. "But Ironwood Pack has concerns beyond a single Omega. The Red Alliance threatens our borders. We came seeking not just Lyra, but assurance of the Northern Alliance's protection." The true purpose emerged: leverage. Garrick was using Lyra as a bargaining chip in a larger political game. Kieran's expression revealed nothing. "The Northern Alliance honors its commitments to all 7 territories. Your borders will be protected as they have been since the unification." "With respect, my lord, recent events suggest the Alliance's strength may be compromised." Garrick's implication hung in the air like poison. He knows about the curse, Lyra realized with sudden clarity. Somehow, Garrick knew Kieran was afflicted. "Careful, Colonel," Marshal Vargas warned. "Your words approach treason." Garrick inclined his head, not quite an apology. "Merely concern for our shared future. Ironwood has always been loyal to the Alliance." "Then demonstrate that loyalty by returning to your territory and reinforcing your borders," Kieran ordered. "Marshal Vargas will coordinate additional support for your defenses against the Red Alliance." "And Lyra?" Garrick pressed. "Lady Lyra remains at Blackthorn Fortress until the blood mark reaches its natural conclusion." Kieran's tone brooked no argument. "This audience is ended." For a moment, Garrick looked ready to challenge the dismissal. Then, military discipline reasserted itself. He bowed stiffly and turned to leave, his warriors following in formation. Only Freya lingered, her eyes locked on Lyra with naked hostility. "This isn't over," she murmured, too softly for anyone but Lyra to hear. "You never belonged among wolves." After they departed, Kieran turned to Vargas. Double the guard on the east wing. I want the Ironwood delegation watched until they leave our territory." "You suspect treachery?" Vargas asked.
"I suspect everyone," Kieran replied grimly. "Drake knows too much about matters that should be private to this council." "We have a spy," Vargas concluded, his expression darkening. "Or worse." Kieran's gaze moved to Lyra. "How much does Garrick know about wolfless Omegas and their potential connection to the prophecy?" Lyra shook her head. "Nothing from me. In Ironwood, being wolfless was simply a defect, something to be tolerated, but never celebrated. Yet he seems unusually determined to reclaim you, despite publicly rejecting you." Kieran's eyes narrowed in thought. "Investigate Drake's recent movements and contacts. I want to know who he's been talking to." As Vargas departed to carry out his orders, Kieran guided Lyra from the southern hall. They walked in silence through stone corridors until they reached a heavy oak door guarded by 2 soldiers who saluted sharply at Kieran's approach. "The War Library," Kieran explained, pushing open the door to reveal a vast circular chamber filled with bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. Every text on werewolf history, magic, and warfare collected over 7 generations. Lyra gasped softly, momentarily forgetting her troubles as she took in the sheer volume of knowledge contained within. Tables covered with maps and open books filled the center of the room. Rolling ladders provided access to the highest shelves. The scent of old parchment and leather bindings perfumed the air. "If answers exist about the blood mark, wolfless Omegas, and the bone curse, they'll be found here," Kieran said. "You'll have full access and assistance from the archivists." "You want me to research my own condition," Lyra realized. "I want you to help save my life and possibly my kingdom," Kieran corrected, his golden eyes intense. "Your connection to the prophecy cannot be coincidence." He moved to a section of shelving and retrieved a leather-bound tome, its cover worn smooth by centuries of handling. "Begin with the Chronicles of the Moon Wars. The first recorded instances of wolfless births occurred during this period." Lyra accepted the heavy book, feeling its weight as both physical burden and symbolic responsibility. "What will you do about Garrick?" "Monitor his movements and prepare for whatever political game he's playing." Kieran's expression hardened. "Drake may have been your intended once, but he's become a threat to more than just your happiness." For the next 3 days, Lyra immersed herself in the ancient texts of the War Library. She worked from dawn until well past midnight, poring over fragile scrolls and dusty tomes with the help of a silver-haired archivist named Thaddeus. The old wolf moved silently among the shelves, retrieving obscure references and translating passages from dead languages with unexpected kindness toward the wolfless Omega in his domain. On the 3rd day, hidden in the back of a crumbling journal written by a healer during the Moon Wars, Lyra found her first significant clue. "The Omega Healers," she read aloud, fingers tracing the faded script. "Rare among our kind, they possess the ability to soothe the savage beast when wolf and man grew discordant. Though lacking wolves of their own, they carried the blessing of the moon goddess in their blood, manifesting as a silver light beneath the skin during moments of power." Silver light beneath the skin. Lyra recalled the strange glow she had glimpsed on her hands after dreaming of running as a wolf. Excitement quickened her pulse as she continued reading. The healing touch was strongest when the Omega formed a true bond with an Alpha, creating a channel through which the Alpha's excess power could be balanced and controlled. The strongest bonds formed between Alphas and wolfless Omegas, though such pairings were rare and often met with superstition and fear. Her hands trembled as she turned the brittle pages, searching for more information. The journal described specific rituals used by Omega healers to connect with troubled wolves, techniques to calm Alphas who struggled to control their beasts during battle rage. But the most valuable information appeared near the end, in a passage that made Lyra's breath catch. The blood mark, traditionally used as temporary comfort for soldiers who lost mates in battle, takes on different properties when performed between an Alpha and a wolfless Omega. Rather than creating a shallow, temporary connection, it may awaken the Omega's dormant healing abilities and forge the beginning of a true bond. In rare cases, the wolfless Omega may even manifest a spirit wolf, Not a physical shift, but a projection of moonlight and power visible only to their bonded alpha and those with the second sight. A spirit wolf. The very concept sent shivers down Lyra's spine. Could her dreams of running alongside Kieran be more than just wishful thinking? She gathered the journal and several other promising texts, hurrying to find Kieran. The mark on her neck seemed to pulse in response to her excitement, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing day rather than fading as a blood mark should. She found him in the training yard, stripped to the waist despite the northern cold, sparring with 3 elite guards simultaneously. His powerful body moved with lethal grace, decades of battlefield experience evident in every calculated strike. The soldiers attacked from different angles, yet Kieran anticipated each move, countering with controlled force that spoke of his superior training and innate alpha strength. Lyra paused at the edge of the yard, momentarily transfixed by the raw power on display. Scars from countless battles mapped Kieran's torso, telling the story of a life dedicated to warfare and leadership. Yet there was something more troubling than old wounds. Beneath his skin, darkness seemed to pulse and shift, visible only in flashes when he turned certain ways in the sunlight. The bone curse, manifesting physically as it progressed. Kieran dispatched the final guard with a sweeping move that ended with the man flat on his back, yielding. Only then did he notice Lyra's presence, his golden eyes finding hers across the yard. Something passed between them through the blood mark, recognition, awareness, a silent acknowledgement of their growing connection. He dismissed the guards with a curt nod before approaching Lyra, retrieving his shirt from a nearby bench. "You found something?" Not a question. He had sensed her excitement through their bond. "The Omega healers," she confirmed, offering the journal. Wolfless Omegas with the ability to heal the discord between wolf and human. They were rare, revered during the Moon Wars for their ability to keep alphas sane during extended campaigns. Kieran's expression remained controlled, but hope flickered in his eyes as he scanned the relevant passages. Spirit wolves, silver light beneath the skin. "I've seen it," Lyra admitted, extending her hand palm up. After dreaming of running as a wolf, a silver glow just beneath the surface. Kieran's gaze sharpened. "You've been dreaming of shifting?" "Running alongside a great black wolf with golden eyes," she confirmed softly. "Through forests I've never seen while awake." His jaw tightened. "Those aren't dreams, Lyra. They're shared visions. I've experienced them too, running with a silver wolf through my ancestral hunting grounds." The implications left them both momentarily speechless. The blood mark was forming something unprecedented between them, a connection that transcended the physical, bridging their minds during sleep. "There's more," Lyra continued, finding her voice again. "The journal mentions a ritual called the Soul Touch. It allowed Omega healers to connect directly with an alpha's wolf, to see the beast separately from the man and help balance their energies." "You think this could help with the bone curse?" "I think it's worth trying," Lyra replied. "The curse creates discord between wolf and human. If I can see storm as you do, perhaps I can help heal the rift." Kieran considered the proposal, military strategy warring with desperate hope in his expression. "The ritual requirements?" "Privacy, moonlight, and physical contact," Lyra explained, feeling heat rise to her cheeks at the last requirement. The healer must place her hands directly over the alpha's heart while concentrating on the bond between them. A commotion at the far end of the training yard interrupted their conversation. Marshal Vargas approached at a rapid pace, his expression grim. "My lord," he called as he drew near, offering a formal salute. "Raiders have attacked the village of Stonebridge on our southern border. Early reports indicate Red Alliance involvement." Kieran's focus shifted instantly, the warrior king replacing the man who had momentarily allowed himself to hope. "Casualties?" "Unknown. The messenger barely escaped with his life." Vargas's jaw tightened. He reported at least 30 raiders, well armed and organized. They struck just before dawn. "Stonebridge lies less than a day's ride from Ironwood territory," Kieran noted, eyes narrowing. "Suspiciously close to where Drake claimed Red Alliance forces were gathering." "A coincidence?" Lyra asked. I stopped believing in coincidences on my first battlefield. Kieran turned to Vargas. Assemble the elite guard. We ride within the hour. You're going personally? Lyra couldn't hide her alarm, especially given what she now knew about the bone curse's progression. A king who won't defend his people doesn't deserve to rule them. Kieran's voice carried the weight of a lifetime of such beliefs. And I need to see the attack site myself. The Red Alliance has never been this bold before. He turned back to Lyra, his expression softening marginally. Continue your research. We'll attempt the soul touch ritual when I return. 2 hours later, Lyra stood on the battlements watching Kieran lead 50 elite warriors through the fortress gates.
His black warhorse pranced beneath him, sensing the impending action. Sunlight glinted off polished armor and weapons as the company thundered across the stone bridge and down the mountain path, soon disappearing into the dense northern forest. Quite a sight, isn't it? The voice came from behind her, smooth and cultured. The warlord riding to battle, just as he has for 20 years. Ambassador Mordath stood several paces away, his pale eyes assessing her with unnerving intensity. Unlike most wolves who exuded physical power, Mordath radiated a different kind of danger, the subtle threat of a mind that calculated every advantage. Ambassador, Lyra acknowledged cautiously, I didn't hear you approach. Few do, he replied with the ghost of a smile. A useful skill in diplomatic circles. May I join you? At her nod, he moved to stand beside her at the battlement, gazing out over the impressive vista of mountains and forests that comprised the Northern Alliance. You've caused quite a stir among the council, Mordath observed, a wolfless omega bearing the king's mark, appearing precisely when the prophecy seems most relevant. I didn't ask for any of this, Lyra responded. I only wanted to escape a broken bond. Yet here you stand, potentially holding the salvation of our entire alliance in your unmarked hands. Mordath's gaze dropped to her wrist where Garrick's bond had once been. Fate rarely consults us before assigning our roles. Silence fell between them, neither comfortable nor hostile. Lyra sensed Mordath had sought her out with purpose, and she waited for him to reveal it. I've been researching the prophecy since long before your arrival, he finally said. The Kingdom of Bone has always been interpreted as the Northern Alliance itself, built on strength, warfare, and alpha dominance, but your presence offers a new perspective. The Bone Curse, Lyra surmised. The kingdom could refer to the curse consuming alphas from within. Precisely. Mordath nodded approvingly. And if that interpretation is correct, then the wolfless one, you, isn't destined to destroy our alliance, but to save it by breaking the curse. But how? Lyra turned to face him directly. I've found references to Omega healers, but the specific techniques for treating something like the bone curse aren't detailed. Because the curse itself is new, Mordath replied. Or rather, it's returned after centuries of absence. The last recorded instance appeared in texts from the early days of the Moon Wars. Hope flared in Lyra's chest. You found historical records of the curse? Fragments only, hidden in obscure texts. Mordath gazed out over the mountains, his expression distant. But enough to confirm it targeted alphas exclusively, beginning with the most powerful. And each time, a wolfless omega played a role in its resolution. Resolution? Lyra repeated carefully. Not cure? Mordath's pale eyes met hers, something unreadable lurking in their depths. That distinction may prove significant. The texts are unclear whether the curse was truly cured or merely transformed. Before Lyra could press for clarification, Marshal Vargas appeared at the battlement entrance, his weathered face set in formal lines. Lady Lyra, he called, a moment of your time. Mordath inclined his head in a formal bow. We'll continue our discussion another time. I believe I may have located texts that will interest you greatly. As the ambassador departed, Vargas approached with measured steps. Unlike Mordath's silent movement, the marshal's boots rang against the stone with deliberate authority, announcing his presence as befitted a military commander. Marshal, Lyra greeted him, noting the tension in his bearing. Is something wrong? Security concerns,
he replied tersely. With the General absent and the Red Alliance active, we're implementing additional protective measures. You'll be assigned personal guards until his return.
Is that necessary?
Lyra had grown accustomed to moving freely within the fortress. General's orders. Vargas's tone suggested the matter was not open for debate. He was concerned about your safety, particularly with the Ironwood delegation still within our walls.
Garrick hasn't left?
Alarm colored Lyra's voice. Colonel Drake claims diplomatic necessity requires him to remain until the border situation is resolved. Vargas's expression conveyed exactly what he thought of this excuse. 2 guards will be posted outside your chambers and will accompany you throughout the fortress. Lyra nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Kieran's precautions. Thank you, Marshal. I appreciate your concern. Vargas studied her for a moment, his weathered face softening slightly. He's never marked anyone before, you know. In 20 years as Alpha King, despite countless political advantages a mate would have provided, the information settled in Lyra's chest with unexpected weight. The blood mark isn't a true mating. Perhaps not traditionally, Vargas acknowledged, but nothing about your connection has followed tradition. He turned to leave, but paused at the battlement entrance. Lady Lyra, the General is a good man beneath the warrior exterior. Whatever this bond becomes between you, remember that. With those cryptic words, he departed, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts and the vast northern landscape stretching before her. Somewhere out there, Kieran rode toward danger, the curse progressing within him, time running short for them both. The next morning, Lyra awoke to frantic activity throughout the fortress. Guards rushed along corridors, servants whispered in corners, and the usual disciplined atmosphere had given way to barely controlled chaos. Her assigned guards, 2 stoic veterans named Tarek and Oren, maintained their posts outside her door, but offered no explanation beyond security concerns. Unable to tolerate the uncertainty, Lyra made her way to the war room where she found Marshal Vargas, bent over maps with several commanders, their expressions grim as they plotted troop movements. "Marshal," she called from the doorway, her guards flanking her. "What's happened?" Vargas straightened, indecision flashing across his face before he beckoned her inside. The General's company was ambushed 10 miles south of Stonebridge. The attack on the village was bait for a larger trap. Horror washed through Lyra. "Kieran?" "Alive, but wounded. The messenger arrived an hour ago." Vargas pointed to a forested valley marked on the map. The Red Alliance forces were 3 times larger than intelligence suggested, with silver weapons and organized tactics unlike their previous raids. "How badly is he hurt?" Lyra's voice shook despite her efforts to remain calm. "Arrow wound to the shoulder, silver-tipped." Vargas's expression darkened. He continued fighting, but the silver in his system combined with the bone curse. He didn't need to finish. Silver poisoning was dangerous to any werewolf, potentially fatal to one already weakened by the curse. "He's struggling to maintain control of Storm," Vargas continued quietly. "The messenger reported moments of battle rage where the General nearly turned on his own men. The soul touch ritual." Lyra's mind raced to the technique she'd discovered for helping alphas control their wolves. "I need to go to him." "Impossible," Vargas dismissed immediately. "The territory between here and there is actively hostile. Even with an escort, you'd be at extreme risk." "He needs me," Lyra insisted, drawing herself up to her full height. "I've found a ritual that might help him control Storm during the journey home." "A ritual?" Vargas's skepticism was evident. "Based on ancient texts and theories?" "Based on techniques used successfully during the Moon Wars," Lyra countered. "Omega healers were specifically trained to help alphas maintain control during battle. I may be the only chance he has of making it back to the fortress." Vargas studied her with narrowed eyes, weighing military reality against desperate hope. "And if you're killed attempting to reach him, what then?" "Then the prophecy was wrong, and the Wolfless One isn't meant to save the Kingdom of Bone." Lyra met his gaze steadily. "But if I am meant to help him, keeping me safe behind these walls while he suffers serves no one." For a long moment, Marshal Vargas said nothing. Then, with military precision, he turned to one of the commanders.
Captain Thorne, assemble our 10 best scouts and trackers. Light armor, fast horses, no insignia or colors. Sir? The captain glanced between Vargas and Lyra in confusion.
Lady Lyra will attempt to reach the general with medical assistance, Vargas explained, his tone making it clear the decision was final. Your team will ensure she arrives alive and undetected. I'll need specific supplies, Lyra added, thinking of the ritual requirements. Herbs from the healer's stores, silver dust, and moonstone if available. Make a list, Vargas instructed. You depart within the hour. As preparations were made, Lyra gathered the essential texts containing the ritual instructions. Her hands trembled slightly as she copied the key passages into a small journal she could carry. The soul touch was dangerous under ideal circumstances. Attempting it with an injured, partially silver-poisoned alpha in the field bordered on suicidal. Yet she felt the rightness of her decision with bone-deep certainty. The blood mark on her neck pulsed with warmth, as if confirming her path. An unexpected visitor arrived as she finished packing. Ambassador Mordath, carrying a small wooden box inlaid with silver. Lady Lyra, he greeted her with a formal bow. I heard of your mission, courageous and foolhardy in equal measure. I have to try, she replied simply. Indeed, he offered the box, which is why I brought this, a rare artifact from my personal collection that may prove useful for what you attempt. Inside lay a pendant of polished moonstone, glowing with soft inner light. The stone was set in ancient silver, inscribed with symbols Lyra recognized from her research, the old language of wolf magic, specifically symbols relating to healing and balance. This belonged to an Omega healer during the height of the Moon Wars, Mordath explained. It amplifies the connection between healer and patient, particularly useful for the soul touch ritual. Lyra looked up in surprise. How did you know? That you'd discovered the ritual? Mordath smiled thinly. The library archives record which texts are accessed. When you requested the chronicles of the Omega healers, the conclusion was obvious. He gestured to the pendant. Wear this during the ritual. It will strengthen your ability to reach Storm while protecting your own mind from backlash. Lyra lifted the pendant carefully, feeling subtle power emanating from the stone. Thank you, Ambassador. This is unexpectedly generous. The Alliance needs its king, Mordath replied simply. Politics can resume once the bone curse is addressed. Within the hour, Lyra rode south with her escort of elite scouts. Captain Thorne led the small company with silent efficiency, choosing paths through the forest that concealed their movement from potential observers. They traveled without standard or colors, dressed as ordinary travelers rather than royal guards. They rode hard through the day, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. By nightfall, they had covered nearly half the distance to Kieran's position. The scouts established a secure perimeter around a small clearing, building fires small enough to provide warmth without announcing their presence to potential enemies. Lyra sat apart from the others, studying the ritual instructions by firelight while absently touching the moonstone pendant that hung around her neck. The soul touch required absolute focus and intimate physical connection, placing her hands directly over the alpha's heart while entering a trance state to perceive the wolf spirit separate from the human consciousness. Under normal circumstances, the ritual created a temporary bridge between Omega and Alpha, allowing the healer to soothe the wolf's aggressive instincts and help harmonize the dual nature of the werewolf. But with the bone curse actively corrupting the connection between Kieran and Storm, the ritual would be far more dangerous. We'll reach the general's position by midday tomorrow if we maintain pace, Captain Thorne reported, crouching beside her. My scouts report increased Red Alliance activity throughout the region. They're searching for something. Or someone, Lyra thought grimly. The ambush suggested the Red Alliance had specifically targeted Kieran, perhaps knowing the bone curse made him vulnerable. The general's condition? She asked. Thorne's expression remained carefully neutral, but concern leaked through. Last report indicated fever from silver poisoning and increasingly erratic behavior. He's lucid, but struggling to maintain command. We need to hurry, Lyra decided, closing her journal. Can we travel through the night? Too dangerous in this terrain. Thorne shook his head. We'd lose horses to broken legs and alert enemies with the noise. Dawn is soon enough. Lyra nodded reluctantly, recognizing the military reality even as anxiety gnawed at her. The blood mark on her neck throbbed with increasing discomfort, another sign that Kieran's condition was deteriorating. The connection between them grew stronger daily, allowing her to sense his distress even at this distance. She attempted sleep, but found only fitful dozing interrupted by fragmented visions, a great black wolf thrashing against silver chains, golden eyes clouded with pain and rage. Kieran kneeling in a forest clearing, hands pressed to the ground as he fought for control, blood seeping through makeshift bandages as loyal soldiers watched their leader with growing fear. Dawn couldn't come quickly enough. The company broke camp with practiced efficiency, mounting fresh horses and continuing south at an urgent pace. They avoided the main roads, instead following game trails and ancient forest paths known only to the Northern Alliance scouts. By mid-morning, they encountered the first signs of recent conflict, a small clearing where the ground was torn by multiple boot prints, blood staining the melting snow. Captain Thorne dismounted to examine the scene, his experienced eyes reading the story written in disturbed earth and broken vegetation. "Skirmish between Alliance scouts and Red Alliance fighters," he reported. "Recent, within the last 12 hours. 3, maybe 4 on each side." "Outcomes?" Lyra asked. "Alliance victory, but wounded." Thorne pointed to drag marks leading south. They continued toward the general's position, carrying at least 1 injured. They pressed on with increased caution, weapons ready as they navigated the increasingly difficult terrain. The forests grew denser, rocky outcroppings providing natural defensive positions that Kieran would have utilized to protect his injured and establish a defensible camp. Near midday, they crested a wooded ridge and spotted thin tendrils of smoke rising from a sheltered valley below. Captain Thorne signaled for the company to halt, dispatching 2 scouts to verify the camp's identity before approaching. "Standard Northern Alliance defensive formation," one reported upon return. "Approximately 30 soldiers remaining from the original 50, multiple wounded, including the general." Thorne nodded grimly. "Approach Protocol Alpha. Lady Lyra stays with me until we confirm security." They descended toward the camp, announcing their presence with Alliance bird calls before becoming visible. Even with warning, they were met by a ring of drawn bows and swords as they entered the perimeter, a testament to the soldiers' heightened vigilance after ambush. The camp itself revealed the severity of the situation. Wounded men lay on makeshift pallets, being tended by the company's field medic. Healthy soldiers maintained guard positions, their exhausted faces showing the strain of constant vigilance. The remnants of Kieran's elite guard had formed a protective circle, defending their wounded at great cost. "Captain Thorne!" a blood-spattered lieutenant called, lowering his weapon. "Marshal Vargas sent you?" "With medical support for the general," Thorne confirmed, gesturing to Lyra. "Lady Lyra brings specialized treatment." The lieutenant's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Lyra, recognition dawning as he noticed the mark on her neck. "This way, quickly." He led them to a tent set apart from the others, heavily guarded by 4 of Kieran's most trusted soldiers. Their expressions were grim, hands resting on weapon hilts, positions suggesting they were prepared to defend against threats from within the tent as well as without. "He's been fighting it for 2 days," the lieutenant explained quietly. "The silver poisoning weakened him, gave the curse greater hold. He ordered us to chain him after he nearly shifted during a fever spike." Ice formed in Lyra's stomach. "You restrained your king with silver?" "On his direct order, my lady." The soldier's voice carried the weight of that terrible duty. "He said if he lost control completely, we were to ensure he didn't harm his own men. Execute him." The unspoken command hung in the air between them. "That won't be necessary," Lyra stated with more confidence than she felt. "I need privacy with him and the restraints removed." The soldiers exchanged alarmed glances. "My lady, that's not safe. The general isn't himself." "I understand the risk," she insisted, "but the treatment requires direct contact without silver interference. Captain Thorne and 1 guard may remain if necessary, but at a distance. After brief consultation, they agreed to her terms with obvious reluctance. Thorn and the lieutenant would remain inside the tent, but would intervene only if Lyra's life was directly threatened. Heart pounding, Lyra pushed aside the tent flap and entered. The interior was dimly lit by a single lantern, the air heavy with the scent of blood, sweat, and pain. Kieran lay on a field cot, his powerful frame secured by silver chains that burned angry red marks into his skin where they touched. His face was pale beneath a sheen of sweat, eyes closed, breathing labored. The magnificent warrior king had been reduced to this, chained like a dangerous animal, fighting a battle more terrible than any he'd faced on external battlefields. As Lyra approached, Kieran's eyes snapped open, immediately finding hers across the small space. Recognition flickered, followed by alarm. "Lyra." Her name emerged as a rasp from his dry throat. "You shouldn't be here." "I found something that might help," she replied, moving closer despite the warning in his gaze. "A ritual used by Omega healers during the Moon Wars." His golden eyes, fever-bright and wary, tracked her movement. "It's not safe. Storm is too close to the surface." "That's precisely why I'm here." She knelt beside the cot, close enough to see the veins of darkness pulsing beneath his skin, the visible manifestation of the bone curse spreading through his body. "I need the chains removed." "No." The word emerged as a growl, his canines visibly sharper than normal. "The ritual won't work through silver," Lyra explained gently. "I need direct contact with your heart." For a long moment, Kieran simply stared at her, internal conflict evident in his expression. Then, with military precision, he assessed her proposal against their dwindling options. "Lieutenant," he finally called, voice strained but commanding, "remove the restraints, but be prepared to act if I give the signal." The lieutenant stepped forward reluctantly, producing a key for the silver locks. "Sir, are you certain?" "Do it." Kieran's order brooked no argument. As the silver chains fell away, Kieran's body visibly relaxed, the angry burns beginning to heal immediately. But tension remained in his powerful frame, the rigid control of a warrior holding back something far more dangerous than mere pain. "How does this ritual work?" he asked, golden eyes fixed on Lyra with laser intensity. She removed the moonstone pendant from beneath her tunic, the stone gleaming with soft light in the dim tent. "I need to place my hands over your heart and enter a trance state. The pendant will help me connect with Storm directly, separate from your human consciousness." "And then?" "I try to heal the discord between you," she explained, aware of how inadequate the explanation sounded against the magnitude of what they faced. "The bone curse creates separation between wolf and human. The soul touch ritual helps bridge that gap." Kieran's expression revealed his skepticism, but desperation won out over doubt. With careful movements, he shifted on the cot, making space for her to kneel beside him. His shirt had been removed to treat his wounds, leaving his torso bare except for bandages around his left shoulder where the silver arrow had struck. Lyra positioned herself beside him, mentally reviewing the ritual steps. The tent fell silent as the lieutenant and Captain Thorne moved to opposite corners, hands on weapons, watching with barely concealed anxiety. "If I lose control," Kieran spoke softly, for her ears alone, "don't hesitate to call for help. Storm is angry, confused. The curse makes him see enemies everywhere." "I'll be careful," Lyra promised, though fear fluttered in her chest. She removed her gloves, allowing her bare hands to hover above Kieran's heart. The bone curse was visible as dark veins spreading outward from his core, pulsing with malevolent energy. Taking a deep breath, she lowered her hands until they pressed against his skin, directly over his heart. Heat flooded through her at the contact, the blood mark on her neck flaring with sudden intensity. Kieran's body tensed beneath her touch, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His eyes flashed from human gold to wolf amber and back again, the beast responding to her presence. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on the moonstone pendant around her neck.
Its energy responded immediately, forming a protective bubble around her consciousness as she began the ritual words. By moonlight's blessing and Omega's touch, I seek the wolf within. Spirit to spirit, heart to heart, I call to the beast, separate from the man. The words were ancient, their power evident in the way they seemed to vibrate in the air between them. Beneath her palms, Kieran's heartbeat accelerated, its rhythm strong but erratic as human and wolf battled for dominance. Storm of the North, black wolf of battle, I call to you directly. Hear me, see me, know me as ally and healer. Kieran's body arched suddenly, a pained sound escaping his throat as the ritual words penetrated the barriers between human consciousness and wolf spirit. The soldiers in the tent tensed, weapons half drawn, but Lyra didn't break contact. Through the blood mark we share, I seek entrance to your domain, not as master or enemy, but as balance and harmony. The world around Lyra faded as the ritual took effect. The physical tent, the watching soldiers, even her own body seemed to recede as her consciousness was pulled inward, following the connection forged by the blood mark into Kieran's very essence. Darkness enveloped her, not the absence of light, but a living shadow that pulsed with rage and pain. This was Storm's domain, the spiritual representation of Kieran's wolf, corrupted by the bone curse into something twisted and agonized. Within this darkness, Lyra perceived movement, massive and predatory. Two eyes appeared, glowing amber in the void, regarding her with predatory assessment. Storm, the great black wolf of Kieran's spirit, separated from the human consciousness by the curse's corruption. In this spiritual plane, Lyra was aware of her own form, not physical, but a manifestation of pure silver light, shimmering in the darkness like moonlight on water. The wolfless Omega, appearing before the most powerful alpha wolf in his own domain. Storm circled her light, wary and aggressive. She sensed the wolf's confusion and pain, felt the burning corruption of the bone curse eating away at the natural connection between wolf and human. Here, in this spiritual battleground, she could see the curse for what it truly was. Not just corruption, but deliberate severance, a magical attack designed specifically to drive wolf and human apart. "Storm!" she called, her voice echoing strangely in this non-physical realm.
"I've come to help."
The wolf snarled, massive teeth gleaming in the darkness. This was no ordinary wolf, but the spiritual manifestation of Kieran's power, ancient, primal, and currently lost in pain and rage. The bone curse had convinced Storm that the human side was the enemy, that Kieran was deliberately suppressing the wolf's true nature. Lyra stood her ground, allowing her silver light to expand outward. "I am not your enemy. Neither is Kieran. You are being poisoned, manipulated by the curse." Storm circled closer, muscles bunched as if preparing to attack. Then, unexpectedly, the wolf paused, nostrils flaring as if catching a scent. Recognition flickered in those amber eyes. He knew her, or rather, he knew the silver light she embodied. "Yes," Lyra encouraged, "you know me through the blood mark, through the dreams we've shared, running together through northern forests." The massive wolf tilted his head, conflict evident in his posture. Part of him recognized her, but the curse's poison whispered otherwise, urging aggression and distrust. Lyra took a risk, extending her light form toward the wolf. "Let me show you the truth." With careful movements, she reached for the corrupted connection between wolf and human, visible in this spiritual plane as a once mighty bridge now crumbling and diseased. The bone curse manifested as oily darkness, eating away at the structure, severing the natural harmony that should exist. "This is what's being done to you," she explained, illuminating the corruption with her silver light. "Not by Kieran, but by an outside force. The curse turns you against each other when you should be one." Storm approached cautiously, examining the damaged connection. Anger flared in those amber eyes, but now it was directed at the corruption rather than at Lyra or Kieran. "I can help heal this," Lyra offered. "Not completely, The curse is too powerful for one ritual, but enough to restore some balance between you." The great wolf studied her for a long moment, ancient intelligence assessing her offer. Then, with deliberate movement, Storm lowered his massive head in acceptance. Lyra directed her silver light toward the corrupted bridge, focusing the healing energy of the Omega gift on cleansing the darkness. Where her light touched, the oily corruption hissed and receded, unable to withstand the pure energy of the moon goddess's blessing. The process was painful for both wolf and human. In the physical world, Kieran's body convulsed beneath her hands as Storm howled in the spiritual realm. But Lyra maintained focus, channeling more light into the damaged connection, pushing back the curse's corruption inch by spiritual inch. She couldn't eliminate the bone curse entirely. Its magic was too deeply embedded, too powerful for a single ritual by an untrained Omega healer. But she could create a temporary sanctuary, a protected space where wolf and human could reconnect despite the curse's influence. As the ritual reached its peak, something unexpected occurred. Storm approached Lyra's silver light form, amber eyes meeting hers in direct communication. The massive wolf circled her, assessing, and then did something she hadn't anticipated. He howled, not in pain but in recognition, the sound reverberating through the spiritual plane with ancient power. In response, Lyra's silver light pulsed and shifted. A form coalesced within the glow, the silhouette of a wolf composed entirely of moonlight, smaller than Storm but elegant and powerful in its own right. Her spirit wolf, awakened by Storm's call and the power of the ritual. For a brief, transcendent moment, the two wolves touched noses in the spiritual realm, the mighty black battle wolf and the silver spirit wolf, Alpha and Omega, power and healing in perfect balance. Lyra felt the connection between them solidify into something profound and unbreakable, far beyond the temporary link the bloodmark should have created. Then the spiritual plane began to fade as Lyra's strength reached its limits. The ritual was ending, pulling her consciousness back toward her physical body. The last image she saw was Storm returning to the partially healed bridge, reclaiming his rightful place in harmony with Kieran's human side. Reality crashed back with painful intensity. Lyra found herself still kneeling beside Kieran, hands pressed to his chest, the moonstone pendant glowing brightly between them. Her entire body trembled with exhaustion, the ritual having drained her physical and spiritual reserves to their limit. Beneath her hands, Kieran's body had gone still. His eyes were closed, breathing deep and regular, not the labored gasps of before, but the peaceful rhythm of healing sleep. The dark veins of this bone curse were still visible beneath his skin, but they had receded from his heart, no longer pulsing with malevolent energy. "My lady?" Captain Thorne's concerned voice broke through her exhaustion. "Are you all right?" Lyra nodded weakly, unable to find words to explain what had occurred in the spiritual realm. She swayed, darkness creeping into the edges of her vision as the full impact of the ritual's energy drain hit her. The last thing she registered before consciousness fled was strong arms catching her as she collapsed, and the steady, healthy beat of Kieran's heart beneath her hand, wolf and human in temporary harmony once more. Consciousness returned to Lyra slowly, fragments of reality assembling like pieces of a broken mirror. Soft furs beneath her, the scent of pine and medicinal herbs, low voices murmuring nearby. Her body felt impossibly heavy, drained by the soul touch ritual to a degree she hadn't anticipated. Even opening her eyes required monumental effort. When she finally managed it, firelight momentarily blinded her. She blinked slowly, the world gradually coming into focus. She was no longer in the command tent, but in a larger medical shelter. Other wounded soldiers lay on pallets around her, being tended by medics who moved efficiently between patients. "Welcome back." The deep voice drew her attention to her right, where Kieran sat on a wooden stool beside her bed. His massive frame seemed incongruous in the simple setting, a king among the wounded. "How long?" Her voice emerged as a dry whisper. 6 hours. Kieran offered a water skin, supporting her head as she drank. The ritual drained you completely. Memory flooded back. The spiritual plane, the corrupted bridge, Storm's acceptance of her help, and most startlingly, the manifestation of her own spirit wolf. She studied Kieran's face, searching for signs of improvement. The fever had receded, his golden eyes clear and focused once more. The dark veins of the bone curse were still visible beneath his skin, but had withdrawn from his heart and vital organs. "It worked," she breathed, relief washing through her. Temporarily, Kieran's expression remained solemn. "The curse is contained, not defeated. Storm is cooperative again. We can communicate rather than battle for control." Lyra nodded, having expected as much. "The soul touch isn't meant to cure, only to heal the connection." "What you did was far beyond healing." Kieran's voice lowered, ensuring privacy despite the crowded tent. "I saw everything, Lyra. I was there, watching as you confronted Storm, as you pushed back the corruption. I saw your spirit wolf emerge." Heat flooded her cheeks. The manifestation of her spirit wolf had been intensely personal, a revelation of her true nature that even she hadn't fully comprehended. "The silver wolf from our shared dreams," Kieran continued, wonder briefly softening his warrior's countenance. "Not just a dream or imagination, but your actual wolf spirit made manifest." "I didn't know it was possible," Lyra admitted. "Everything I read suggested spirit wolves were theoretical, a legend among Omega healers. Much about you defies conventional understanding." His hand moved as if to touch hers, then withdrew, a warrior's discipline reasserting itself. "The men are calling it a miracle. Word has spread that you confronted my wolf spirit directly and emerged not just unharmed, but victorious." Lyra struggled to sit up, concerned about such rumors. "I didn't confront Storm as an adversary. The ritual is about harmony, not dominance." "Nevertheless, stories grow." A ghost of a smile touched Kieran's lips. "The wolfless Omega who tamed the warlord's beast. It makes for compelling folklore." She couldn't help but notice the increased respect in the glances cast her way by passing soldiers. The ritual had changed her status in their eyes, no longer just a marked Omega, but something more. "We move at dawn," Kieran informed her, shifting to practical matters. "The scouts report Red Alliance forces still searching the region. We need to reach Blackthorn Fortress before they regroup." "Am I fit to travel?" Lyra gestured to her weakened state. "You'll ride with me," Kieran stated, not a suggestion but a decision. "The soul touch created a stronger connection between us. If the curse reasserts itself during the journey, your proximity may help me maintain control." The unspoken vulnerability in this admission wasn't lost on Lyra. The mighty Alpha King acknowledging his dependence on her, however temporarily, represented a fundamental shift in their relationship. "Rest while you can," he advised, rising to his imposing full height. "Dawn comes early, and the journey will be demanding." As he turned to leave, Lyra caught his wrist, the contact sending warmth cascading through her palm. "Kieran, in the spiritual realm, when Storm and my spirit wolf connected, did you feel it too?" His golden eyes darkened with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Yes," he answered simply. Then, after a weighted pause, "It wasn't supposed to be like this, was it? The blood mark should have been temporary. Instead, they were forming something unprecedented, a true bond between an Alpha King and a wolfless Omega, forged in the spiritual fire of the soul touch ritual." "Get some rest, Lyra." Kieran gently removed his wrist from her grasp. "We'll face whatever comes next when we're safely back at the fortress." The company departed at first light, moving in tight formation through the dangerous territory. Lyra rode with Kieran as promised, seated before him on his massive black warhorse. The physical contact between them seemed to stabilize the effects of the ritual, keeping the bone curse suppressed as they traveled. His arms formed a protective cage around her, one hand holding the reins, while the other remained free to reach his sword if needed. They traveled north at an urgent pace, scouts ranging ahead to warn of potential ambushes. The wounded were distributed among the able-bodied, slowing their progress but maintaining the company's cohesion. No one would be left behind, the Northern Alliance's most sacred code. By midday, they had covered significant ground without incident. Kieran called a brief halt to rest the horses and check the wounded. As soldiers attended to necessary tasks with military efficiency, Lyra noticed Captain Thorne engaged in intense conversation with a scout who had just returned from a reconnaissance mission. Both men's expressions suggested troubling news.
"What is it?" she asked Kieran as he returned from conferring with his lieutenants. "Activity at the fortress," he replied grimly. "The scout spotted signal fires on the northern watchtowers. The emergency protocol." Alarm tightened Lyra's chest. An attack? Or internal trouble? Kieran's expression darkened. "Either way, we need to hurry." They resumed their journey with increased urgency, pushing horses and men to their limits. Kieran's body was a study in controlled tension behind her, his awareness focused on potential threats, even as his mind clearly raced with concerns about his fortress. As they crested a familiar mountain pass in the late afternoon, Blackthorn Fortress came into view in the valley below. No visible damage marred its imposing silhouette, but numerous armed figures patrolled the battlements, and the massive gates stood closed, an unusual sight during peacetime. "Something's wrong," Kieran murmured, almost to himself. "The southern banner has been replaced." Lyra followed his gaze to the flagpoles atop the highest tower. Where normally 4 banners flew representing the cardinal directions of the Alliance, only 3 remained. The southern banner, representing Ironwood Pack and its neighboring territories, had been replaced with a solid black flag. "What does it mean?" Lyra asked. "Secession or rebellion," Kieran replied, voice tight with contained fury. "The southern territories declaring independence from the Alliance." A scout approached at a gallop, his expression grave as he saluted. "My lord, riders approach from the fortress. Marshal Vargas leads them." Kieran nodded sharply, signaling the company to form defensive positions while continuing forward. Within minutes, a contingent of 20 riders became visible, advancing from the fortress direction. At their head rode Marshal Vargas, his weathered face grim beneath his helmet. The 2 groups met on neutral ground halfway between the pass and the fortress. Kieran nudged his horse forward, positioning himself at the front of his company. Lyra remained close behind him, sensing the dangerous tension vibrating through the air. "Marshal," Kieran greeted, his tone revealing nothing. "Explain the southern banner's replacement." Vargas straightened in his saddle, meeting his king's gaze directly. "The southern territories have declared conditional independence, my lord, pending new leadership of the Northern Alliance." "Rebellion, then." Kieran's voice was deadly quiet. "A necessary transition," Vargas corrected, his expression solemn rather than triumphant. "The council voted yesterday. With the Bone Curse progressing and the Red Alliance pressing our borders, they felt new leadership was required." "And who leads this transition?" Kieran asked, though the answer seemed already known to him. "Ambassador Mordath has been appointed interim Lord Protector." Vargas delivered the news without inflection. The vote was 5-2. Betrayal. The word hung unspoken in the air between them. Mordath, the smooth-talking diplomat, had orchestrated a coup while Kieran fought Red Alliance forces at the border. "And you, old friend?" Kieran's question carried the weight of 20 years of battlefield camaraderie. "Where do you stand in this transition?" Vargas's weathered face revealed genuine regret. "With the Alliance, my lord, always with the Alliance. But the Bone Curse advances. Mordath convinced the council that only his solution could save us." "Solution?" Lyra spoke up, unable to remain silent. "What solution?" Vargas's gaze shifted to her, something like pity in his eyes. "The original interpretation of the prophecy was correct, Lady Lyra. The Wolfless One will break the kingdom of bone by sacrificing herself to end the curse." Cold horror washed through her as understanding dawned. "A blood ritual. He means to kill me to end the curse." "To save the Alliance," Vargas corrected, as if the distinction mattered.
Mordath discovered ancient texts describing how the last bone curse was ended through the willing sacrifice of a wolfless Omega under the full moon. Willing? Kieran's voice had dropped to a dangerous growl, his eyes flashing amber as storms stirred beneath the surface. And if she's unwilling? Then the sacrifice still works, Vargas admitted grimly, but the protection is temporary rather than permanent. Kieran's hand moved to his sword hilt. You expect me to surrender her for slaughter? To surrender myself to Mordath's coup? I expect you to put the Alliance first, as you always have. Vargas straightened, soldier to soldier. The full moon rises tonight. The ritual must be performed at its apex. If you surrender peacefully, Mordath has agreed to allow you to retire to the Northern Territories with full honors. And if I refuse? Vargas's expression hardened. Then we have orders to take the Omega by force, and you by chains if necessary. The curse makes you unstable, my lord. The Council fears you'll soon be unable to distinguish friend from foe. Tension crackled between the two forces, hands hovering near weapons, a single wrong move away from bloodshed. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs as she calculated their chances. Kieran's company was outnumbered and exhausted from battle and travel. To everyone's surprise, Kieran laughed, a short, harsh sound, utterly devoid of humor. 20 years I've ruled this alliance, Vargas. 20 years of peace enforced by strength. Did you really think I'd walk blindly into an obvious trap? He raised his hand, and from the forests on either side of the road emerged dozens of Northern Alliance soldiers, Kieran's personal guard, who had remained at the fortress during his expedition. They had positioned themselves perfectly for an ambush, ready to surround Vargas's men at their lord's command. "Always secure your retreat and prepare for betrayal," Kieran quoted, an old military maxim he had taught Vargas himself. "I sent orders to my personal guard the moment we found evidence of targeted ambush. They've been watching the fortress for 2 days." Vargas's expression shifted from confidence to grim resignation. "You were always the better strategist." "Not better," Kieran corrected. "Simply more paranoid. Now, we will proceed to my fortress, and you will explain to me exactly what Mordath has planned, and who else is involved in this rebellion." The marshal nodded once, a soldier acknowledging superior tactics. "Colonel Drake arrived with reinforcements the day after your departure. He and Mordath spent hours in private consultation before approaching the council." Garrick. The final piece clicked into place. Kieran's absence, the coordinated Red Alliance attack, Mordath's coup, and Garrick's convenient arrival, all orchestrated to seize control of the Northern Alliance while eliminating both Kieran and Lyra. "The Red Alliance?" Kieran demanded. "Mercenaries hired to draw you out," Vargas confirmed. "Not genuine ideologues. Drake provided the funding." With tactical precision, Kieran's hidden forces surrounded Vargas's contingent, disarming them without bloodshed. The marshal surrendered his sword personally to Kieran, maintaining the dignity of his rank even in defeat. "You'll be held for trial after this is resolved," Kieran informed him, "neither vindictive nor lenient. Your previous service will be considered in your sentence." Vargas accepted this with a soldier's stoicism. As he was led away, he turned back once. "My lord, despite appearances, I never wished for your death, only for the Alliance's survival." "The road to damnation is paved with noble intentions," Kieran replied, an old Northern saying that served as both acknowledgement and dismissal. With Vargas secured, Kieran reorganized his forces for the approach to Blackthorn Fortress. His personal guard, loyal beyond question, formed the vanguard, while his battle-weary company protected the wounded in the center. Scouts ranged ahead, reporting that Mordath had closed the main gates upon seeing Vargas's capture. "The eastern tunnel," Kieran decided, conferring with his captains. "It connects the fortress to the mountain caves, intended as an evacuation route, but equally useful for infiltration." He turned to Lyra, who had remained silent during the military planning. "This will be dangerous. Mordath wants you specifically for his ritual. If we're separated, hide rather than fight." "I'm not helpless," she reminded him, thinking of her newly manifested spirit wolf. "The soul touch showed me that."
A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Indeed not, but the Alliance needs you alive, not heroically sacrificed. The Alliance. Not him personally, but the kingdom they both served. Kieran's language maintained the professional distance of a ruler, even as his eyes conveyed something far more personal. They approached the fortress from the eastern mountain face as darkness fell, using the lengthening shadows for cover. The tunnel entrance was concealed behind a natural rock formation, known only to the royal line and their most trusted commanders. Kieran led them through narrow passages lit by occasional phosphorescent fungi, the ancient escape route smelling of stone and secrets. After nearly an hour of careful progress, they reached a heavy iron door built into the passage wall. Kieran produced a key from a chain around his neck, the lock mechanism turning with well-oiled precision despite its age. "We emerge in the lower armory," he explained quietly to Lyra as the door swung open. "From there, we can access the main keep through the servants' corridors." The infiltration proceeded with military precision, Kieran's elite guards securing each section before allowing the main force to advance. They encountered minimal resistance. Mordath had concentrated his loyalists around the council chamber and outer defenses, leaving the inner fortress vulnerable to Kieran's intimate knowledge of its layout. As they approached the great hall, sounds of argument echoed down the stone corridors. Kieran signaled for silence, positioning his forces strategically around the hall's entrances. Lyra remained at his side as they crept closer to the massive doors, left partially open to allow couriers to come and go. Through the gap, they could see a heated council meeting in progress. Ambassador Mordath stood at the head of the table where Kieran usually presided, his elegant diplomatic attire replaced by ceremonial robes embroidered with ancient symbols. Beside him stood Garrick Drake, no longer in ironwood colors, but wearing the black and silver of the Northern Alliance, a presumptuous declaration of his intended position. The remaining council members sat in their customary places, their expressions ranging from resolute to uncertain. Lady Ravenna appeared to be arguing vehemently with Mordath, her fist pounding the table for emphasis. "The ritual requires the full moon's apex," Mordath was saying, his smooth voice carrying clearly. "We cannot delay simply because Vargas failed to return with the Omega." "You mean with our rightful king?" Lady Ravenna corrected sharply. "This coup grows more distasteful by the hour, Mordath. First assassination disguised as combat, now ritual sacrifice. What next?" "Pragmatic necessity," Mordath replied without remorse. "The bone curse will destroy us all if not addressed. Historical records are clear. Only the blood sacrifice of a wolfless Omega under the full moon can permanently end the curse." Garrick stepped forward, his military bearing a poor imitation of Kieran's natural authority. "My forces have secured the outer perimeter. If Blackthorn attempts to return, he'll be captured before reaching the gates." "And the Omega?" Mordath asked. "My men searched the surrounding settlements," Garrick replied. "She can't have gone far on foot. Once found, she'll be brought directly to the ritual chamber." Lyra's blood ran cold at the casual discussion of her capture and sacrifice. Beside her, Kieran's body had gone dangerously still, the controlled fury of a predator preparing to strike. "We've heard enough," he whispered, signaling his guards to prepare. "On my mark." The attack was swift and overwhelming. Kieran's forces stormed the great hall from 3 entrances simultaneously, weapons drawn but disciplined in their advance. Council members gasped in shock as the Alpha King himself strode into the chamber, very much alive and in command, Lyra at his side. "Ambassador Mordath!" Kieran's voice filled the chamber with lethal authority. "You appear to be sitting in my chair." For once, Mordath's diplomatic composure cracked, genuine fear flashing across his pale features before he regained control. "General Blackthorn, we feared you lost in the Red Alliance ambush." "Clearly," Kieran replied dryly. "Your mercenaries were thorough, if ultimately unsuccessful." Mordath's eyes narrowed at the accusation. "Mercenaries? I don't know what Vargas told you, but the Red Alliance—" "Save your denials for your trial," Kieran cut him off. "Colonel Drake's involvement confirms everything." All eyes turned to Garrick, who had instinctively moved into a defensive posture when Kieran's forces entered.
Unlike Mordath, he made no attempt to deny the accusations, instead assessing the tactical situation with a soldier's pragmatism. "You're outnumbered, Blackthorn," he declared, though uncertainty tinged his voice as he counted the armed guards flooding the chamber. "The Council has voted. The Alliance needs new leadership, untainted by the Bone Curse." "The Council voted based on false information and coercion," Lady Ravenna countered, rising from her seat with dignity intact. "I, for one, rescind my vote in light of these revelations." Other council members murmured agreement, the fragile coalition Mordath had assembled crumbling in the face of Kieran's return. Only Lord Fenris remained steadfast beside Mordath, his scarred face set in grim lines. "The Bone Curse is still real," Mordath argued, changing tactics. "Whatever temporary remedy you've found, the corruption will return. The ritual is the only permanent solution." "A ritual you conveniently discovered after arranging my ambush," Kieran noted, advancing toward the head of the table with predatory focus. "One requiring the sacrifice of a specific Omega who happened to bear my mark." Mordath's gaze shifted to Lyra, calculation replacing fear. "The prophecy is clear. The Wolfless One will break the Kingdom of Bone. Her sacrifice will save countless lives, including yours, General." "You misinterpreted the prophecy," Lyra spoke up, moving to stand beside Kieran. "The Kingdom of Bone isn't the Northern Alliance. It's the curse itself, a construct of death magic designed to consume alphas from within." Murmurs rippled through the council at this alternative interpretation. Mordath's expression tightened with frustration as his carefully constructed narrative began to unravel. "Baseless speculation," he dismissed. "Historical records document the previous ritual clearly." "Records you alone have seen," Kieran pointed out. "Convenient." Sensing his position weakening, Mordath made a desperate gesture toward Lord Fenris. The scarred alpha nodded once, then suddenly overturned the massive oak table, creating momentary chaos in the chamber. As guards scrambled to maintain order, Mordath seized the distraction to draw a ceremonial dagger from his robes, lunging not at Kieran, but at Lyra. "If logic won't persuade, perhaps necessity will," he snarled, all pretense of diplomacy abandoned. Kieran moved with battlefield reflexes, intercepting Mordath's attack with his forearm. The dagger sliced through fabric and skin, drawing blood but missing its intended target. Before Mordath could strike again, Kieran's fist connected with his jaw, sending the diplomat staggering backward. Guards immediately surrounded Mordath and Fenris, disarming them as Kieran checked his bleeding arm. The wound was superficial but significant. The ceremonial dagger had been coated with a silvery substance that sizzled against Kieran's werewolf blood. "Silver nitrate," he identified grimly, "designed to accelerate the curse." Alarm flashed through Lyra as she saw the dark veins of the curse pulse visibly around the wound, the corruption spreading more rapidly than before. The soul touch ritual had created temporary harmony, but Mordath's weapon had deliberately destabilized that balance. "Take them to the cells," Kieran ordered, his voice strained as he fought against the sudden surge of the curse. "Double guards, no visitors." As his men complied, Kieran turned to the remaining council members, maintaining regal composure despite the poison spreading through his system. "This council is adjourned until tomorrow. Lady Ravenna, you have temporary authority if I am indisposed." The veteran alpha female nodded gravely, understanding the unspoken implication. If the curse overwhelmed Kieran, someone needed to maintain order. Kieran strode from the chamber with controlled urgency, Lyra following close behind. They spoke nothing until reaching his private quarters, guards posting themselves outside as the door closed. "How bad?" Lyra asked immediately. Kieran rolled up his sleeve, revealing the wound already turning an angry red dark veins spreading outward at an alarming rate. "Bad. The silver nitrate was designed specifically to accelerate the curse. Mordath planned this contingency well." "We need to try the soul touch again," Lyra insisted, moving toward him. Kieran stepped back, maintaining distance. "Too dangerous. The corruption is spreading too quickly. Storm is already fighting me for control." As if to emphasize his point, his eyes flashed from gold to amber, canines visibly lengthening before he regained control with visible effort. "Then what do we do?" Fear and determination warred within Lyra. There must be another way besides Mordath's sacrifice ritual. Kieran moved to his desk, retrieving an ancient key from a hidden compartment. There is. In the oldest section of the library, behind a locked door, lies the complete prophecy. Not just the fragment Mordath revealed to manipulate the council. You knew the full prophecy all along? Lyra couldn't hide her surprise. I suspected there was more, Kieran corrected. Each Alpha King passes certain secrets to his successor. The existence of a complete prophecy was mentioned, but its exact location lost over generations. I've had archivists searching discreetly for years. He pressed the key into her palm, his fingers momentarily intertwining with hers. Third level of the library, north wall, behind the tapestry of the first pack. A door that appears to be stone until the key touches it. I'll go immediately. Lyra turned toward the door, but Kieran caught her arm. Wait. His expression softened briefly, the warrior giving way to the man. The full moon rises in 3 hours. Whatever the prophecy reveals, whatever ritual might counter the curse, it must be performed at the moon's apex, just as Mordath planned for his version. Understanding dawned. You're giving me time to find an alternative before Storm takes control completely. Kieran's voice was steady, despite the grim reality. The silver nitrate ensures that will happen by midnight. If you find no alternative by then, the guards have orders to contain me in the silver chamber below the fortress. The implications chilled Lyra to her core. The silver chamber was designed to hold werewolves who had lost control, a prison of pain from which few emerged sane. I'll find the answer, she promised, conviction steadying her voice. The prophecy wouldn't have brought us together without purpose. As she turned to leave, Kieran spoke once more, his voice lower, almost vulnerable. Lyra, whatever happens, know that the blood mark between us became something I never expected, but don't regret. The closest he would come to admitting deeper feelings while maintaining his role as king. Lyra nodded, unable to trust her voice, and hurried from the chamber. Time was their enemy now, the curse accelerating toward its inevitable conclusion while the full moon approached its apex. The library was eerily quiet when Lyra arrived, the usual archivists absent due to the earlier lockdown. She navigated the labyrinthine shelves alone, climbing narrow spiral stairs to the third level where the oldest texts were kept. The north wall was dominated by a massive tapestry depicting the legendary First Pack, werewolves who had established the original territories before the Alliance existed. Behind the heavy fabric, the wall appeared solid stone, ancient and unmovable. Lyra ran her fingers across the surface, feeling nothing unusual until she inserted Kieran's key into what appeared to be a random crack in the mortar. The stone shimmered, its solidity dissolving to reveal a small wooden door with intricate carvings. The chamber beyond was circular and windowless, illuminated only by phosphorescent fungi similar to those in the escape tunnel. Shelves lined the walls, containing scrolls and artifacts so ancient they predated modern werewolf history. At the center stood a simple stone pedestal bearing a single scroll sealed with silver wax imprinted with the image of a full moon. Lyra approached reverently, aware she was seeing something few werewolves had ever been permitted to witness. The seal broke with a soft sound like a distant howl, the parchment unrolling to reveal text written in the old language, the same script inscribed on Mordath's moonstone pendant. Lyra froze, sudden suspicion crystallizing into certainty. The pendant Mordath had given her to amplify the soul touch had been inscribed with symbols she now recognized as binding and control rather than healing. He had intended it to weaken her, to ensure she couldn't resist the sacrifice ritual. Focusing on the scroll, she found the prophecy written in its complete form. The wolfless one will break the kingdom of bone, but from its ruins shall rise a kingdom of moonlight. Not through blood sacrificed, but freely given. Not through death, but through the joining of souls. When spirit wolf and battle wolf run as one, the curse shall transform from destruction to creation. What was meant to sever will instead unite. What was meant to destroy will instead renew. Her breath caught as understanding dawned. The prophecy wasn't about sacrifice at all, but transformation. The blood mark, the soul touch, her spirit wolf manifesting, all pieces of a pattern she now recognized. Further down the scroll, detailed instructions described a ritual called the moon binding, an ancient ceremony to permanently join an Alpha and Omega's spirits under the full moon. Unlike Mordath's false sacrifice ritual, this joining required mutual consent and equal participation. Most critically, it required the willing transformation of the bone curse itself, taking the destructive magic that separated wolf from human and repurposing it into a constructive force that would permanently bond Lyra's spirit wolf with Kieran's physical one, creating balance between them. The ritual needed to be performed at the moon's apex, on sacred ground, with specific incantations and movements. It was complex, but feasible, if Kieran could maintain control long enough to participate. Lyra gathered the scroll and hurried back through the fortress, the countdown to midnight growing more urgent with each passing minute. When she reached Kieran's chambers, she found Lady Ravenna standing guard outside, her expression grave. "He's worsening," the veteran Alpha informed her without preamble. "The curse advances more rapidly than we've ever witnessed. He's fighting it, but—" "I found the answer," Lyra interrupted, holding up the ancient scroll. "A ritual to transform the curse rather than merely end it." Hope flickered in Lady Ravenna's eyes. "Can it be done in time?" "It must be." Lyra's determination left no room for doubt. "I need access to the sacred grove on the north side of the fortress, ritual supplies from the healer's stores, and Kieran, however difficult he is to manage currently." Lady Ravenna nodded sharply, military efficiency taking precedence over protocol. "I'll arrange everything. The moon reaches apex in 90 minutes. Inside Kieran's chambers, transformation was already underway. The mighty Alpha King knelt in the center of the room, his body contorted in the painful intermediate state between human and wolf. Dark veins pulsed visibly beneath his skin, the curse's corruption spreading throughout his system. His golden eyes had shifted fully to amber, storm pushing for complete control. "Lyra." Her name emerged as a growl, recognition fighting through the beast's instincts. "You shouldn't be here, not safe." "I found it," she told him, approaching cautiously, but without fear. The true prophecy, the real ritual, not sacrifice, but transformation. She knelt before him, placing the scroll where he could see it. The bone curse can be repurposed, changed from destruction to creation. But we must perform the ritual together at the moon's apex. Kieran struggled visibly to focus on the ancient text, Storm's influence making concentration difficult. How? The single word contained equal parts pain and determination. "The moon-binding ceremony," Lyra explained quickly. "It uses the curse's own energy to permanently bond your wolf with my spirit wolf, creating balance between us. Neither dominance nor submission, but harmony." A low growl rumbled from Kieran's chest, Storm responding to the concept. "Dangerous. If I lose control during the ritual—" "You won't," Lyra stated with conviction. "Storm recognized my spirit wolf during the soul touch. He knows we're connected. He'll cooperate." Their eyes met across the small distance between them, hers human blue, his wolf amber, the two sides of their natures acknowledging the necessity of trust. "Preparations are underway," she continued. "The sacred grove, ritual components, witnesses from the council. All we need is your consent." Kieran fought through another wave of pain as the curse advanced, his body trembling with the effort of maintaining partial control. When he spoke again, his voice carried the dual timbre of man and wolf together. "We consent." The sacred grove stood atop the fortress's northern edge, ancient trees forming a natural circle open to the night sky. Generations of Alpha Kings had communed with their wolves here, the ground hallowed by tradition and power. Stone pillars carved with the history of the Northern Alliance marked the cardinal directions, their surfaces illuminated by carefully placed torches. In the center of the grove, a circular platform of white stone captured the moonlight, its surface etched with the same symbols found on the prophecy scroll.
Lyra stood upon this platform, dressed in ritual garments of silver white that complemented her fair coloring. Around her neck hung a new pendant, not Mordath's treacherous moonstone, but a simpler amulet blessed by the council's eldest members. The remaining council members formed a solemn circle around the grove's perimeter, witnesses to a ceremony none had seen performed in living memory. Lady Ravenna supervised the ritual preparations personally, her military precision ensuring everything matched the ancient scroll's specifications. As midnight approached, Kieran was led into the grove by 4 of his most trusted guards. His condition had deteriorated further, the curse's advancement turning his partial shift into something painful and unstable. He moved with difficulty, fighting for control with every step, dark veins pulsing visibly beneath his skin. The guards helped him to the platform opposite Lyra before withdrawing to a safe distance. For a moment, Alpha and Omega regarded each other across the moonlit stone. He nearly consumed by the curse, she luminous in the ritual garments, both aware of the magnitude of what they attempted. "The moon reaches apex in 3 minutes," Lady Ravenna announced formally. "The ritual may commence when the participants are ready." Lyra extended her hands palm up, inviting Kieran to place his atop hers. He moved forward with careful control, his larger hands engulfing hers, the connection sending visible silver light pulsing up her arms. "By moonlight and ancient rite, I call upon the spirits of wolf and human to witness this binding," Lyra began, her voice clear in the hushed grove. "What curse has sundered, let choice reunite. What magic has corrupted, let will purify." The ritual words vibrated with power, the language of old wolves carrying authority beyond modern speech. As Lyra continued the invocation, silver light spread further up her arms, illuminating her from within, just as it had during the soul touch ritual. Kieran struggled to maintain focus as the curse fought against the ritual's magic. Storm pushed harder for control, sensing the impending transformation of the very corruption that had separated them. When it came time for Kieran to speak his part, his voice emerged as a blend of human speech and wolf growl. "By blood and bone, by fang and claw, I surrender neither wolf nor man, but offer both in equal measure. What was forced apart, I willingly rejoin. What was poisoned, I reclaim as strength." The moon reached its zenith directly overhead, bathing the ritual platform in pure white light. The timing was critical. At the moon's apex, the veil between physical and spiritual realms thinned, allowing the transformation of magical energies. "I call forth my spirit wolf," Lyra continued, the silver light now enveloping her entire body, "not through blood sacrifice, but through soul's offering." As the words left her lips, the silver light coalesced around her, taking the form of a magnificent wolf composed entirely of moonlight. Unlike during the soul touch, this manifestation was visible to all present, a spirit wolf made tangible through the ritual's power. Gasps rose from the watching council members, many of whom had dismissed the concept of spirit wolves as mere legend. "I call forth my battle wolf," Kieran responded, his body contorting as Storm pushed against the final barriers, not through domination but through partnership. Dark energy visibly separated from Kieran's form, the bone curse made manifest as oily shadow. But rather than dispersing, the darkness reformed beside him, taking the shape of a massive black wolf with amber eyes. Storm, given temporary independent form by the ritual's magic. The 2 wolves, one silver moonlight, one shadow and bone, regarded each other across the platform. Then, responding to an unspoken command, they began circling their respective humans, creating a living representation of the ancient symbol for eternity. "As these wolves circle, so do our fates intertwine," Lyra and Kieran spoke in unison, following the ritual text. "As the moon witnesses, so is our binding sealed." The critical moment arrived, the transformation of the curse itself. Lyra and Kieran pressed their palms together, their blood mingling where silver nitrate had wounded him and ritual preparation had marked her. The dark energy of the curse flowed between them, visibly changing from corruption to connection.
from destruction to creation. Bone to moonlight, Lyra invoked. Shadow to silver, Kieran responded. Two natures, they declared together. One bond. The spirit wolves responded to the invocation, charging toward each other from opposite sides of the circle. When they collided at the center, directly between Lyra and Kieran, a blinding flash of silver-white light erupted, forcing all witnesses to shield their eyes. When vision cleared, the platform held not two separate wolves, but a single magnificent beast. Storm's powerful form now infused with silver light that pulsed in time with Lyra's heartbeat. The bone curse had transformed, its destructive energy repurposed into the living bridge between Alpha and Omega, between physical wolf and spirit wolf. Kieran stood fully upright now, the painful partial shift resolved into perfect balance. The dark veins had vanished from his skin, replaced by faint silver traceries that matched those now visible on Lyra's arms. Their eyes, his gold, hers blue, both contained subtle flecks of the other's color, visual evidence of their now permanent connection. The transformed wolf regarded them both with intelligent eyes that held Storm's wildness, tempered by the spirit wolf's wisdom. Then it bowed its great head once, before dissolving into mist that flowed into both Kieran and Lyra simultaneously, returning to its rightful place within their joined spirits. "It is done," Lady Ravenna announced with undisguised awe. "The bone curse is transformed, the prophecy fulfilled." Kieran turned to face the assembled council, his natural authority now enhanced rather than undermined by the wolf within him. "The kingdom of bone is broken," he declared. "From its ruins rises the kingdom of moonlight, an alliance of balance rather than dominance, of partnership rather than subjugation." He extended his hand to Lyra, who stepped forward to stand beside him. The ritual had transformed not just the curse, but their relationship. The temporary blood mark evolved into a permanent bond unlike any in werewolf history. "The wolfless Omega who broke the kingdom of bone," Kieran continued, formal recognition infusing his words with power. "Henceforth to be known as Lady Lyra Blackthorn, Luna of the Northern Alliance and bearer of the Spirit Wolf." The title sent whispers through the assembled council members. Luna, the traditional designation for an alpha's mate, never before bestowed on a wolfless Omega. Yet none could deny the rightness of it after witnessing the ritual's power and success. Lady Ravenna was the first to kneel, offering the formal salute of the Northern Alliance to both Kieran and Lyra. The other council members followed suit, acknowledging not just their king, but the Omega who had saved him, and by extension, the entire alliance. "What of Mordath and his conspirators?" Lord Fenris asked once formalities concluded, practical concerns returning now that the immediate crisis had passed. "They will face justice at dawn," Kieran declared. "Not execution, but exile. They are banished from Alliance territories for life, their names struck from pack records." "And Colonel Drake?" Lady Ravenna inquired. A dangerous smile touched Kieran's lips. "Colonel Drake receives a special sentence. He will return to Ironwood Pack stripped of rank and status to serve as Omega Guardian for the remainder of his days." The poetic justice wasn't lost on the council. The Alpha who had rejected a wolfless Omega as worthless would now spend his life serving and protecting the very wolves he had once despised. In werewolf society, no greater humiliation existed for a former Alpha. As the council members departed to implement Kieran's judgments, he and Lyra remained in the sacred grove, the transformed bond between them still settling into its new configuration. "Can you feel it?" Lyra asked quietly, her hand finding his. "Storm is different," Kieran acknowledged. "Still powerful, still wild, but no longer fighting for control. It's as if he finally understands we are stronger together than divided." "The spirit wolf feels more tangible," Lyra added, marveling at the new sensation. "Not just a vision or dream, but a real presence within me." Kieran's expression softened as he gazed at her in the fading moonlight. The prophecy spoke truth, though not as Mordath interpreted it. The wolfless one did break the kingdom of bone by proving that being wolfless was never a weakness, but simply a different kind of strength.
His hand gently tilted her chin upward, golden eyes meeting blue. "You saved not just me, but the entire alliance, Lyra Blackthorn." The use of her new name, his name, sent warmth cascading through her. "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "Neither dominant nor submissive, but equals. That's the kingdom of moonlight the prophecy promised." His response came not in words, but in action, closing the final distance between them with a kiss that sealed their bond more thoroughly than any ritual. In that moment, Alpha and Omega, Battle Wolf and Spirit Wolf, King and Luna found perfect balance, the harmony that would define their reign and transform the Northern Alliance for generations to come.
High above, the full moon began its descent from apex, having witnessed the breaking of a kingdom of bone and the rise of a kingdom of moonlight, a prophecy fulfilled not through blood sacrifice, but through the most powerful magic known to wolves or humans: choice, trust, and love freely given.